who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We thank you, Lord, for this day. We thank you for your grace and for your mercy. We thank you for the rising of the sun. Lord, we thank you for the many blessings that you've given. We ask that you let your spirit dwell within our hearts, within our minds, guide us through this meeting. Forgive us for those things that we've done, said, or thought that's contrary to your will. But we ask that you restore us in your favor. Lord, we ask that you continue to guide us, keep us in direction this day and forevermore. We pray in the name of your Son Jesus, who died that we might have life and have it abundantly. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, Council Member. May we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Ames.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Felshaw.
Present.
Councilmember Neal.
Present.
Councilmember Guest, absent. Councilmember Page.
Here.
Councilmember Samuel.
Present.
And Councilmember Lewis.
Okay, we do not have any presentations or proclamations today. So now would be the time for any citizen who wishes to speak. If you would like to make comment on scheduled agenda items 1, 4, 5, 6, or the consent agenda, the time to do so is now. If you haven't already done so, and you would like to speak on one of these items, please fill out the green slip and hand it to the officer. We will bring you in when it's time to speak. That's 1, 4, 6, and the consent agenda. Items number 2, 3. Items number 2 and 3 have already been heard in a public hearing, so are not available for comment. If you were here to speak on items 7 or 8, we will have a separate public hearing on those items. Or if you would like to make comment on any item, I will open up the microphone at the end of our meeting for that purpose. But right now it's for 4, 5, 6, and the consent agenda. And we'd appreciate if you keep your comments to 3 minutes. The green light will come on when you approach the podium, and the red light will come on when your time is up.
We don't have anybody.
Okay, thank you. There's nobody. Council, I'd entertain a motion on the consent agenda, please.
Mayor,
Motion to approve.
Go
I
ahead.
ask that item A be pulled. I have a question about A.
You want to just vote on it separately? Is that what you're saying, or pull it
Yes.
completely?
Yes.
Vote on it separately?
I'd like to vote on it separately.
Okay. All right, then, or will you amend your motion, council member, to remove A for now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second on the floor?
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion on any of the items other than A?
I have a question, Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
On item B, we're being reimbursed by Texas Department of Transportation. Do we know what the actual cost is each year for the city of Beaumont?
Page 4. You can see the total cost was nearly $180,000. And we invoiced them, as you can see, well, the last day of each quarter. So, do you see that in the back? Page 4, attachment A.
Okay, but does that $179,000 include the additional times per year that we clean it?
What are you referring to?
I'm just asking if we get properly reimbursed by the state for all the work that we put into that area.
It doesn't fully reimburse us, no. And then there's been some other cleanups, for example, that College Bridge, close to Interstate 10, where we have some homeless camps.
Right.
Did we invoice them for that, Chris? TxDOT, or do you know? So that's not a TxDOT bridge on College?
The only cleanup that we've done
Just the one near Floyd's? Okay.
Okay.
So if we do another cleanup, we'll try to get reimbursed, but it's not a part of this agreement.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
Mayor, I have a question on item F concerning the Rotary Playground. I understand that the bids were higher. I'm assuming they were significant. And then what is the process for us to go back out again? I mean, I'm assuming that we begin to promote this project again, hoping to attract new bids?
We'll reassess. We may try to do the sewer work ourselves. Reassess the design, you know, it's given to us by a consultant engineering firm. It was nearly double what we estimated, and that doesn't happen very often. So we didn't feel comfortable making a recommendation to you, so we're just gonna start from scratch.
So it was double.
I don't want to, you know.
Yes, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda separate from A? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Item A. Is there a motion on item A?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion?
Question, yes. I want to make sure I understand, that project was not completed. We're just completing the payment for the phases that this particular company did, is that correct?
Well, it was supposed to just do, Mike Harris is here. Was it supposed to just do sewer manhole repair citywide? And, you know, I don't know if it was because they weren't making much money or what, but the money did, I mean, the project did not, it wasn't like a single project, wasn't it citywide?
Citywide on manhole rehab.
Yeah, so, you know,
But the initial contract was 600,000, is that correct?
yes, sir.
And they only did a small portion of it, $125,000 worth of work. So they're not completing that contract. They will be doing no more work with us.
We would not recommend them again.
Oh, okay, that's what I was concerned about.
Okay,
Okay. Mayor?
yes.
Okay, so I'm looking at this in a little bit more detail, and I see that their mobilization cost alone was $30,000. So that's not doing work, that's getting ready to do the work. Was this money that we were paying them out of the capital fund, or where did the money come from? Was it out of the water sewer fund, or what?
Capital program.
It was a capital program. Were we dissatisfied with this company's performance?
Yes.
Did the work that they did that we signed off on, was that satisfactory? And the recommendation is now to take all of this in-house.
Come on up. This is Mike Harris over Water and Sewer Operations.
As if you talk from back there, the people watching you on television can't hear you. You're good? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Now,
The recommendation now is to take it all in-house?
we're taking it in-house, yes, sir. We have put together a manhole rehab crew in-house. We started end of February, first part of March, and like I said, we've been knocking them out. I don't have a number right in front of me on exactly how many we've rehabbed in front of me, but we've put a pretty good chunk into them.
Okay, I guess where I struggle is because I've been here a while, and we've been told in the past that it might be more efficient to go out and contract this stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
So we went that way, and now we're going back to where we were maybe before 2015, and we're doing stuff more in-house.
Correct.
And I'm trying to understand
Why the-
rationale here? What's happening here?
What happened in this particular case, there was one company that were doing manhole rehab, done a phenomenal job, and they were very reasonable. When this particular job come out, that company didn't bid, and the T. Gray company did bid, or the lowest bid. We went with the T. Gray company, but their work was not satisfactory at all. The other company that we had went with first time that didn't bid wasn't interested in doing the work. At this time, they had several large projects going, so that's when we put together an in-house crew and started doing it in-house.
So is it only if we get one particular company that we're comfortable with that will do the work? Is that the only time where it's more efficient as opposed to being in-house? I'm just not understanding.
No,
I have a question
Yes,
that
sir.
might, I'm not, as I understand, this T-grade company that got the bid
Yes, sir.
initially,
yes, sir.
they backed it up for over a year.
Correct.
And you were about to disengage them from the contract, but they made a pleading
Sure.
statement that they would do better, and they tried it, it didn't happen.
It didn't work, correct.
And from that, that's when you began to utilize our own staff
Sure.
to get it done.
Correct.
And you're not saying this is the direction that we're gonna go from this point forward, but they, because of the time that it lagged on the contract, you chose to,
Right, right. At this particular time, we don't have a contractor that's doing manhole rehab, and because of the number of manholes that we have in the system that's needing rehab, that's why we chose to put together the crew in-house, and that's why the in-house crew is doing it. Like I said, if perchance we put another contract together and get a reasonable contractor, then yes, we'll turn some of the manholes over to them as well. But
Well, I understand we have 10,000 manholes in the city of Beaumont.
yes, sir.
And that it is taking us and would take us an incredibly long time to
Correct.
rehab all of those. When you decided to go in-house, does that impact your budget in terms of hiring people or taking them off of other jobs that they were previously assigned to? How does that work?
We actually had the equipment on the yard already purchased. The equipment is there. So it was a matter of putting the personnel with the equipment. We didn't hire anyone additional for manhole rehab.
You did not?
We were able to pull from a couple of crews, some guys with concrete experience and such as that to put this crew together.
Okay, so there's no additional expense to your department to do this, even though we've had to pull
Except for
people?
the material cost.
Okay, and going forward, do you expect to continue to do all manhole rehab in-house? Do we need, as a council, to think about changing the budget, amending the budget to allow you to hire different, more personnel for that? Are you comfortable with the pace that we're going to be able to
I'm comfortable with the
do?
pace and the personnel we have that's doing the manhole rehab at this time. I don't believe that we'll be able to do all manhole rehab in-house, that we will eventually, over time, try to put some more contracts together to get contract help because of the large number of manholes. As you said a while ago, 10,000 manholes, it would take several years for us in-house to be able to catch every manhole.
Do you have a target goal for how many manholes you want to try to see rehabilitated in 2021?
I don't have that number in front of me. Bart, do you remember what we had talked about by the end of next year?
I think the initial goal,
It was
the
600?
initial goal was to take the sewer rehab, the LAN study, and knock out all of those manholes. So what his crews are working on right now is to complete all of the work in LAN Phase 1 study. So, you know, Mike and I had talked, we figured we'll hit this for about 6 months with in-house crews, see what progress we're making, see if we knock out everything that was in that Phase 1 study. If we can't get it done for any reason, then we'll go back to do a contract. But I think, we'll give his guys a shot, see if we can knock those out. I think there was about 700
I believe
or
it
so
was.
left, somewhere in that range, 500 to 700.
Could I ask on behalf of council that we be given, maybe at least a quarterly update on
Sure,
how we're doing on those
Sure.
things?
No problem.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you.
So, Mike, just to clarify too, I had a lot of calls regarding manholes. You remember this? Is this that same company? Because we had problems, we had people complaining.
I believe it is, if I remember the calls that we had went over.
Well, I'd
Yes.
called the city manager, and I think he put you in touch with me to answer those questions, because I did have quite a few
Yes, ma'am.
calls of people complaining.
Yes, ma'am.
And secondly, city manager, there is a mechanism in place when you prepare the budget that the division heads, department heads can come to you if they feel like they need more people or whatever, so you can put that into the budget, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harris.
One last question, Mr. Harris.
Oh,
Did
sorry.
that have anything to do with the Helbig Road project?
No, sir, that was a different company.
Okay.
That was a pipe bursting company. That company is actually T-Con, or T-Construction, and this is T-Gray, so.
Mike, where was the majority of this
It's in
project done that
Great.
T Gray, where was it?
Pretty much citywide. They're pretty widespread. They wasn't necessarily in one concentrated area. So like I said, it was citywide.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I believe there's a motion and a second on the floor for item A. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Number 1, please.
Mayor and Council, item number 1 is an ordinance entitled, an ordinance amending the fiscal budget of the city of Beaumont for the fiscal year 2020 to appropriate additional funds to cover expenditures in the solid waste, COVID-19 recovery, Imelda recovery, Laura Marco recovery, municipal transit, Terrell Historical Library, general and capital reserve funds, to approve the transfer of funds, providing for severability and providing for repeal. And Todd Semino, our CFO, will come forward and lead you through the item.
Mayor and council, as you know, towards the end of each fiscal year, we analyze each fund of the city to determine if an interfund transfer of cash or an additional appropriation of funds is needed. So in our financial policies, an interfund transfer of cash is recommended when a fund doesn't have sufficient cash, revenue, or fund balance to sustain its operations. That's usually like the municipal transit fund or some of our internal service funds. And per our city charter, if a fund is projected to expend more funds than what was originally appropriated in the original budget, then we need to come back to you and ask for an additional appropriation of funds. So the details of those interfund transfers of cash and additional appropriation of funds is before you in the agenda memo. They require your approval, and I'm here and happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
Okay, council, you have heard the reading of item number 1. Is there a motion on this item, please?
So move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any questions or comments? Thank you,
Wait,
Sima.
I have a question. What is the total amount that we're asking be transferred when you add all these proposed amendments?
Are you talking about additional appropriations or transfers?
It's the proposed amendment speaks to the transfers, right?
So the transfers, the interfund transfers of cash are mentioned in item number 7 and item number 8. Items 1 through 6 are requesting additional appropriation of funds, not for interfund transactions.
So
So it's done on a fund-by-fund basis.
I understand that. But we're taking from our fund balance, is that right?
So
To shore up these other funds.
when you're doing the interfund transfer of cash, you're taking from basically the general fund balance and shoring up the capital reserve fund, if that's the one you're talking about.
And what's the total amount that we're taking from our fund balance to shore
From
up
the
these-
general fund, as it's written in that memo, it's $2.5 million. We usually transfer cash every year to the capital reserve fund for their operations because the only revenue that's in the capital reserve fund is a fleet rental. So that provides for our replacement of all of our rolling assets. You know, our police vehicles, fire vehicles, stuff like that. But for things like equipment and facility improvements, there's no revenue stream to the capital reserve fund. So the general fund just transfers in cash for those. And since there was no transfer of cash in fiscal year 2020, we're going to go ahead and transfer cash this year in preparation for next year's budget.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor of item number 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Item number 2, please.
Mayor and council, item number 2 is an ordinance entitled an ordinance vacating and abandoning an alley located adjacent to 705 Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway, City of Beaumont, Jefferson County, Texas. At a joint public hearing held on March the 16th, the Planning Commission recommended 5-0 to approve the request with one condition being met prior to coming before the City Council, and that condition has been met. The administration recommends approval.
Thank you, council. You've heard the reading on item number 2. Is there a motion on this item?
So move for approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion also carries unanimously. Item number 3, please.
Item number 3 is an ordinance entitled an ordinance authorizing the ratification for the conveyance and dedication of private streets located in the Sandalwood subdivision to the City of Beaumont, Texas. At a joint public hearing held on February the 17th, the Planning Commission recommended 7-0 to approve a proposed ratification, again for the conveyance and dedication of private streets and infrastructure to the City of Beaumont once completed with the following condition, and that is approval of conveyance document by the City Council. The administration recommends approval.
Thank you. Council, you heard the reading of number 3. Is there a motion on this item, please?
I move for approval of the ratification with the condition that the speed bumps be removed.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yes, I have a question. What is the fee that had to be paid in order to make application for that?
Mr. Boone's looking.
Well, I think you were about to mention what I was asking. So there's not a fee that has to be paid in order for a community organization or association to ask that the city adopt those, the street?
Yeah, I remember when we
Don't
put
they have
that
to pay all the
through.
title work and fees and
Yeah.
so forth for the conveyance, Chris?
So, I don't believe there's a fee, but I can get you an answer to that. They do, if there are any issues with title work or conveyance, we do require that the neighborhood association do pay for those fees.
Okay, I have a question regarding that, but it's not to this issue. I'll bring it up at the end of the
Yes, sir.
Okay.
meeting.
All right, is there any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of item number 3, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 4, please.
Mayor and council, item number 4 is an ordinance entitled an ordinance granting a franchise for solid waste collection and transportation services to Natchez Management Services. The agreement provides for a term of 1 year from its effective date and a franchise fee of 7% of gross revenues received for service. And according to the city charter, franchise ordinances require readings at 3 separate council meetings. This is the second reading today. The administration recommends approval.
Thank you, council. You've heard the reading of number 4. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor for approval. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 5, please.
Mayor and council, item number 5 is an ordinance entitled an ordinance of the City of Beaumont amending ordinance 20-020 to amend the public health emergency disaster orders for the City of Beaumont, continuing the closure of certain city facilities, providing for severability, providing for a penalty, and providing for repeal. On July the 28th, the City Council approved an ordinance that provided for the closure of certain city facilities. One of those facilities was the Civic Center. And the Children's Museum, as you know, leases space in a carved-out section of the Civic Center building that has a separate entrance. And I think it was an oversight, or it was definitely on the administration's part, that the Children's Museum was not excluded in the language of that ordinance. And the reason being was, the Art Museum is located in a city-owned building. The Energy Museum is located in a city-owned building. Those were not touched. And just keep in mind that these museums, to our knowledge, are not bringing large groups together. So that's number one. Number two, all of those 3 museums are managed, meaning they manage them, they operate them, not city staff. So I'd ask for the council to consider just adding, with the exception of the Beaumont Children's Museum, which is a tenant in the Civic Center building, and it would allow them to reopen.
Thank you. Council, you've heard the reading of item number 5. Is there a motion on this item?
Move to approve.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Oh, wait, okay, is there any discussion? Councilmember Getz.
I offer an amendment to include opening up all of the city facilities. I am in favor, of course, for the Children's Museum to be open, but I think that given the fact that the number of cases continue to drop, the number of hospital beds continue to increase, I'm offering an amendment to open up all the city facilities.
Okay, there's an amendment on this motion. Is there a second for the amendment?
No seconds required according to our rules, Mayor.
Okay. Accept it.
Comments?
In just a minute, please.
Okay.
Vote on the amendment first.
Okay, yes. All right, comments on the amendment or on the other side?
On the amendment.
Okay, go ahead, please.
One of the things that we discussed several weeks ago was when the distinguished Dr. Arfine was here. I asked him specifically, I said, what kind of numbers are we looking for in the ICU? If it gets to that and drops below it, would that seem reasonable? The number that he gave was 30. Yesterday, well, let me rephrase that. According to one of the CEOs of the hospitals with whom I spoke today, he said they're averaging 11 ICU beds in the hospital. Now that's significantly lower than 30. I went to public schools, went to French, so I learned that back then. And so I really think it's time for us to review what we said we would do as it relates to what he said, because that was the number that the distinguished physician outlined for us. He said, if we get below 30, that'll be great. I said, okay, so 30's the number. Actually, he said 35, and then he dropped it to 30. But when you call the hospital, speak to the CEO, and they said there's 11 in ICU, then that's significantly below the number that we were looking for. And it would have had to have been lower over the last several weeks for it to be 11 today. But he said that's what it's averaging, 11. So based on what we outlined before and following the same protocols that we would expect to follow the governors, I think it would be reasonable for us to take a look at doing exactly what we said we were going to do when we got to whatever that magic number was, which was 30. And with that in mind, I think that's one of the things we need to look at. And to my knowledge, I don't think anybody up here knew that it was 11.
Actually, that's in one hospital. Together, there is 18 or 19.
Okay.
So I did know. And secondly, there's 47 COVID patients between both hospitals today, but last Tuesday there was 68, and there was 35 in ICU last Tuesday. So it's gone down significantly this week. And what Dr. Arfine asked us is if we would, saw that consistently. I talked to him this morning. But with that said, there's a motion for amendment on the floor, so I'm going to call for a vote on that item. Go ahead.
I have a question, or comment. You said that 11 was one hospital. Now, I want to go on record as saying I also called to find out the number of COVID patients that were, as of September 7th, in the hospital and ICU. And it's in the 20s, like 23 is the number I was given.
That was yesterday. That is true.
Okay.
It went down today.
Okay. So 23, and as I understand, we have gone from having in the 40s in the July-August timeframe to the 30s to now the 20s. And if we're not willing to open up all of our city facilities, which the taxpayers paid for, to let them use it, with those being the numbers, then, as Councilmember Pate said, what are the numbers going to be, and what will the litmus test be? Because in this state, we take our marching orders to a large extent from the governor's office. He sets the tone, he sets the pace, and he has provided us instructions through his executive order as to what we are supposed to do in terms of opening up our venues. He's given us discretion, which we have exercised, to remain closed if we choose, but he's also given us discretion to open. Neighboring counties throughout the state have opened up their venues, and Councilmember Pate spoke to that a couple of weeks ago and listed a bunch of cities. So we've got schools open now. Children are going to be attending in-person classes. They already do in some districts. Private venues were open, except for bars, but most private venues are open. What is the standard if we don't want to do it now?
Private venues are open at 50%.
That's right.
Okay, I'd like to hear, if you don't mind, from our Public Health Authority, for Sherry Ormore, if you can give us any insight on what's being talked about here. I do recognize, because I look at the numbers every day, that they have been going down, but then they'll pop back up and then we'll have a couple deaths back and forth. I have been following the hospitals on a day-to-day basis. You are right, yesterday it was 20-something. Today it's like 19, I believe, in ICU, 47 in regular beds. But there were 68 last week. So, Sherry, I know you talked to them too, so if you don't mind, I'm sorry I'm maybe catching you off guard, but just like to hear your thoughts on this.
So, good afternoon. So everyone is correct. Our numbers have gone down significantly, and we were, of course, extremely excited to see that. We do know that, however, our numbers have gone down because there's not been as much testing. People were actually focused on the hurricane and evacuation, and so with that, we know that that's one of the reasons why our numbers did go down. The virus is still very virulent in our community. We are still getting increased numbers now after we saw our numbers even one day go to 0. So then up to 16 and then up to 36. And I think today, maybe yesterday, we were at 32. So we are seeing those numbers go up again. And as long as the numbers are up, the virus is being transmitted. We do we have a couple of factors that we're looking at from a public health standpoint as well. We're looking at people who evacuated and stayed in shelters, and now they're back home. So we don't know. We need, over the next couple weeks are really, really crucial, because we do believe that we will see those numbers increase. We also have just come off of a Labor Day holiday, and historically we have seen those numbers increase after Memorial Day and after the 4th of July. No doubt about it, those numbers do increase. And so if we can believe that everybody practiced social distancing and wore masks or stayed home for Labor Day holiday, then we would be in a good shape. I do doubt that has happened. So that's our concern from a public health point of view.
Okay. Just a question, and you may not know the answer to this, and maybe Officer Riley does, because I know it came through the PIOs, but right after the evacuation, when the governor came in, he mentioned that they might be sending more state testing in the areas that evacuated. Have we heard that?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
So
It's been offered, and we're looking at scheduling some of those community testing. Hopefully, if we can get some in this week. We know that after an exposure to COVID-19, there's between a 2-day to 11-day window that a person would test positive or start to show symptoms. So we want to be sure that we're starting to schedule some of those community tests that the state has offered.
Okay, because I did have a couple of calls about whether we would do, and because the people who evacuated were asking about it, I think, when they were coming back. Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions of Ms. Ulmer? Yes.
I do. Ms. Ulmer, in your opinion, at what point, what number in terms of hospitalizations do we have to reach in order to be able to safely open up all the city facilities?
That we would have to speak with hospital experts about. Our job is to prevent the spread. And so once they get in the hospital, that's another area. That's not the area that we work with as public health. As long as there are cases in the community, we know that there's transmission. So a person who tests positive, we attempt to reach that person, identify those contacts, and that information that we get is only as good as the person that we're talking to can remember where they've been, who they've been around, and so those are the numbers that we see increase. We have a whole lot more people in the community with the virus than we do in the hospitals. Unfortunately, those persons that go to the hospital are extremely ill, but they probably got it from somebody in the community who may not be showing symptoms at all. So that's our concern.
So I guess my follow-up is that until there is a vaccine, which hopefully will come soon, we're going to continue to have the spread of this virus. That's just a fact, and so at some point, I'm trying to figure out where that point is. Is it going to be low enough for us to open up our facilities, even though we know that there's probably, just like with the flu, there's going to always be the spread of that?
Yes, but there's a vaccine for the flu, and there's also medication for the flu that you can take within 24 hours. There is no vaccine for this virus, for coronavirus.
As of yet, right.
As of yet. And we see very young children. We see healthy teenage athletes who have had to be life-flighted from here to Houston for open heart surgery because they tested positive for COVID. So there's so little that's known. I can tell I'm really passionate about this. There's so little that's known about the virus until we don't even know what the lasting effects are going to be for those people who seem to have had a very quick recovery and are doing well. We talk to people all the time, and they've been diagnosed 5 months ago, but they are still experiencing shortness of breath, extreme fatigue, still too tired to return to work. So there's so much that we don't know about it, so we just need to be careful.
So is it your position that we should not open up anything until there's a vaccine?
I can only give you the facts, and it's up to you to decide.
But we're trying to base our decisions on your
If I had
facts.
to decide, I would not open. I would not.
Until there was a vaccine, or even after that?
Even after that, we need to take a look at our numbers. So the Medicare just recently put out a guidance for nursing homes. So this is, it's so complicated, but we are looking at nursing homes and testing their staff and their patients. Start with the staff. So if the positivity rates are less than 5%, the staff will be tested once a month. If it's 5 to 10%, it's once a week. If it's over 10%, then the staff is going to be tested twice a week. And that's where we were last week. We were at 10.5%, I think, positivity rate. So this week, we're 9.8% because we didn't have that many tests last week. So we're having to expose people to getting tested if they work in a nursing home twice a week. If there is one positive case, then everybody, patients and the residents included, will have to be tested. So there's got to be something that's, and we know that that is a vulnerable population, but there's got to be something that's really serious about this virus for us to be at this point that we're testing people so frequently.
Okay. Councilmember Pate and Councilmember Samuel.
Sherry, we want to tell you how much we appreciate the hard work you're putting in. All of us want to look at science because that's what it's based on. Is that 10%, is that in the nursing homes?
No, that's in the community.
Okay, of everybody that we've tested, and wasn't there, help me out just a second, I think it recently came out that we only asked people that had symptoms to come in and test. That's what the governor put out about a week or so ago, or maybe a little longer than that. So basically, if they don't have symptoms, they're not coming anyway, which automatically keep that number high, because if they have the symptoms, they're showing up. If they don't have the symptoms, they're not. And what we need to do is, as Sherry said, you know, she's going to do everything she can to keep the city as safe as possible, and we're fortunate she's there. What she's asked us to do is we've got to look at the doctor that we brought in here the other day who said if it gets below 30, that's the number. That's, I said that.
Consistently below 30.
Okay. We were both here. I heard it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Consistent.
But my point is, a lot of these people, unless you can tell me differently, if somebody comes in to an ER today with mild symptoms, they're quarantining them at home as opposed to putting them in the hospital, which would seem reasonable, okay? Which is one of the reasons that the numbers in the ICU, before that, anybody that showed up that had any symptoms, they would automatically put them in ICU because they didn't know. So the protocols that have been set up, I think, have been very successful from the standpoint of screening those that are obese. That's number one. Diabetic, number two, and other conditions. So if somebody's not obese, diabetic, and over 65, where most of the people, matter of fact, I think it's only one person of all the deaths, and all of these people are precious, but only one of them, of the 60-ish that we have so far, didn't have underlying medical conditions. All but one. And so that is science. That's what it's telling you. 1 out of 60 had an issue, but the other 59 had underlying medical conditions that caused the complications with COVID and most of those people were over 65 years old. So we've got to, if we're going to sit down like we've done before and evaluate our decisions based on just what Sherry said, it's up to the people in the healthcare, not her job. That wouldn't be fair to her to put it on her, because she's trying to keep everybody safe in Beaumont. But we turn to the people who are the experts out there. Once they get to the hospital, can you handle it? Because that was one of the things. Can you handle all these people coming in the hospital at once? And at one particular time, they couldn't. I mean, literally, you had 2 nurses for every patient, when the average is 6 patients per nurse. If they were COVID patients, they had 2 nurses. And so everybody was being overworked. And that's one of the reasons they were overworked, working overtime, exhausted. And we've gotten to a point where the numbers have changed. So we're below the number that Dr. Arfine outlined that would be the goal. And we're not just at 29 or 28. When you get to 11 and 30 was the goal, that
11
tells
is one hospital, Councilman Mary.
how many we got in town? that
We've
are
got
te-
2.
Okay.
But I mean, it's not right to, I'm saying that he said consistently, because we had a doctor here that said things to us,
Yeah.
and it's
Yes.
not fair to him to repeat what he said, but not say everything that he said.
Well, you're absolutely
Because I
right.
have talked to him almost every day.
And I texted him today.
Okay,
So-
and what did he tell you? Did he tell you 11 and 1?
Well, I know I got that directly from the CEO, and I'm on the
That's not
board of
the-
that other hospital. So,
So I did mention that we have patients from St. Patrick's Hospital in Lake Charles who were admitted to St. Elizabeth's. So St. Elizabeth's numbers are much higher than
Not
that. They
Baptist.
admitted 8 positive COVID patients in one day.
because they were at St. Patrick's and they couldn't take care of them. And St. Patrick's is part of Christus
Christus.
Healthcare, which has nearly
Right.
50 hospitals
Right,
from here to
Right.
Mexico and California.
right.
So, but if we're going to base it on the science of the scientist, of the doctor, then we have to look at that. Now, that's everybody's decision. But we should pay attention to what he said.
Yeah, we
It's
should.
not at 30 at St. Elizabeth, and it's not at 30 at Baptist. And that was the magic number, because I asked him for the magic number. Matter of fact, I specifically said, what is the magic number? He originally said 35. He said, no, if we get it to 30, that's it. And I'll stop there.
Councilman Samuel?
Thank you, Mayor. We've reached a point in time that you can't believe too much of anything that you hear on television, radio, and pretty much the same way about just directly talking to individuals. We were here to vote on one item to open the Civic Center, the Children's Museum. But we've gone from the Children's Museum back to an issue that we dealt with a couple of weeks ago. On yesterday, one of my classmates' son came to visit me to let me know his father was on a ventilator, could hardly walk, talk, because he's contracted COVID. To some people, it may not be that significant. There's a lot of people out there that are afraid. There are people dying still here in our city. For me to have to make a decision, one, going around the house to kind of come back and do something, and think that we've had professional advice, or we've heard from the health community itself. When we call Sherry from a seat, just expecting to deal with just one place that has small numbers of people going there, to opening everything in the city of Beaumont. I think that's somewhat irresponsible, and it's unconscionable to me. But we've had situations that the numbers have been down before, trending down. There's a difference between hitting a bottom and trending down. Am I correct?
Correct.
Part of the reason that we had several more thousands of people to die is because we looked at a trend as opposed to a bottom. And now, because we have, in the past week, we've had less numbers. Does that mean 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now it's going to be the same? We're coming off of a holiday.
Yeah.
We're coming off of now people are coming from storms, coming back in town. They've not had an opportunity. There's less testing. But now we're being asked to open everything in our city based on a week or two of results. I think one of the problems we have is listening to people who has no knowledge of the science, who made a prediction that in a couple of weeks it'll go away on its own, things like that. And that has caused hundreds and thousands of people to continue to die. Now, we can make that decision. But if I'm going to look at all of the facilities, I prefer having some other health professionals and not putting this on Sherry's back alone. Mr. Fauci or Dr.
Orfing, the
Arfine.
one that spoke
Orfine.
to us, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from him rather than someone telling me what he said or what they thought he said.
You were here.
So I would prefer hearing from him than somebody giving me hearsay as to what they think somebody said.
Well,
Mayor,
if you don't mind, I haven't talked yet, and I'm going to say one thing, and then I'll call on you. Okay, so I do have in writing from Dr. Orfine, but I'm sure he'd be more than willing to come back, because I have in writing from him every day. But with all due respect, Councilmember Pate, Dr. Orfine did say consistently, and I know we were both here, but he did say that. But secondly, if you're saying that we should take his advice, which is what I think I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, because you asked him and he said 30, and you said he said 35, and then he said 30. I believe he said 30, then he said 35. But regardless, it doesn't matter. We also need to keep in mind that not all of us took his advice that day, because some people did vote against it. So I think that everybody has the right to their opinion, whatever it is, and we look at it in different ways. And I'm sure if you ask a lot of the people, right, just this small group that's here in our audience, they would all have their thoughts on it too, because I know that a lot of people in the city have been affected by this very severely. And if you've been affected by it very severely, you have a different thought process, or if you know someone that's close to you that has been. And I know we all know people who have passed away from it. So with that said, if you have one more thing, then I'm going to call for a vote, Councilmember.
thank you, Mayor. You know, it is clear that everybody has different opinions about this. You know, I feel like it is hypocritical for the city to continue to have our facilities, which are paid for by the taxpayers, completely shut down when similar venues are allowed to operate under the governor's guidelines. We have schools opening. We have churches that are opening now for in-person services. And I think that we just heard from our public health director that she would not be comfortable with us opening these city facilities even after we have a vaccine. So, you know, there are certainly people that are going to look at this as something that you have to be so afraid of that you will ignore the science because you are catering to an emotion. And maybe that's because you've seen people that you love suffer from this disease. So I get the emotional turmoil that some people go through when they're talking about this subject. But I approach things from a position of being rational and logical, and from a position of science. And so when I'm doing that, I am looking at the morbidity rates, which fortunately are low. One's too many. We've heard that said a lot. But you have to look at it in terms of the total population. I believe it is time. I want the Children's Museum to open. And if this motion fails, this amendment fails, I'll support opening it up for the Children's Museum. But the city manager talked about large numbers. Well, some of the things that we have to consider are our various venues that we have in our parks, our various centers that we have where we have small group meetings. Not any larger than what you'd expect to find in the Children's Museum. If I have a neighborhood association meeting at the community center at Rogers Park, I might expect 15 to 25 people. That's not a large number of people for a building that size. I would also be able to argue, based on the size of the event center and how many square feet there are there, you know, you could have 150 to 200 people there, and it's not crowded there because it's such a big facility. So the Children's Museum is a relatively small facility. It's a portion of the Civic Center. They're going to keep their groups small, but I think that we need to be consistent in what we're doing, and right now what we're doing is very inconsistent.
May I ask,
And we all
add
have-
one more thing, if I may, Mayor?
Councilmember Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Attorney, I have a question for you. There's only 6 council members here today. What happens if this amendment's a tie?
It fails.
Okay. I would like to make a recommendation that we vote on the original item with the understanding that we place this amendment on the agenda for next week.
I don't agree to that. Sorry. I think we need to vote on the amendment.
Well, the point of order, the amendment has to be voted on
I
before.
understand that.
Thank you.
He was asking that.
Okay.
That's why I don't agree with it.
Okay, if I may.
Please, and please make it quick, because we're going to take a vote. Please make it quick.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
First off, I came here anticipating that we were going to vote on the Children's Museum. I had no idea that Councilman Getz was going to bring this up, but since he did, I felt obligated to comment on it based on the numbers that I know, the numbers we heard. Now, it's entirely up to council what they do, but when we're not only affecting the people that can't go have their weddings, which is what we talked about, and every single program that was going on in the event center, with the exception of one in August, was a wedding. Every event except one was a wedding, according to the information I got. Somebody correct me if I'm mistaken. Not only we're affecting them, we've got caterers that work with the city that I know for a fact have lost literally $500,000 because they can't do anything. They don't have a restaurant to fall back on. They're not a restaurant and a caterer, they're caterers. We are impacting a whole lot of people and a whole lot of families. And if we can do this and do it safely, which we can do based on what the governor's outlined, which he's done for wedding venues, which was 50%, and we can even be, and I mentioned this before, we can even be stricter in what we put out as far as restrictions for putting on an event in the event center and the civic center. But we've got to look at this as scientifically and say, what are the numbers? When the numbers come up to what we hope they would, and they finally get to that, we should make our decisions based on that. But again, the only thing I anticipated today was voting on the Children's Museum. Until Mike brought it up, I just assumed we were going to talk about that later on. But since he did, and he brought up as an amendment, that's when I felt obligated to make some of the statements.
If we could depend on that it would be done safely, I would agree with you, because you just said if we make sure we do it safely. But how can we say that when we're sitting here today and the guidelines say wear a mask and not everybody even has a mask on?
Well, it's called social distancing.
Inside, in a public building, you're supposed to wear a mask.
6 feet.
We're not here to discuss what the governor's order says, but I've read it, and I've also talked to the governor, and I know what the intent is.
I think if
So
you look at
regardless, I'm gonna call for a
CDC, it
vote.
says if you
All in
don't have
favor of this
social
motion,
distancing,
all
wear a
this-
mask.
It does not.
Okay, read it.
Mayor, would you please indulge me since I haven't spoken at all?
Sure.
I'll speak very
Yeah,
quickly.
I didn't see you with your hand up, or I'd have
I
called on you
didn't, but
first.
I ask you, please indulge me. I know you're
Do
ready
you
to
have that
vote,
order
so
with
am
you?
I.
I'm gonna ask you at the end to read that order, please, Counselor.
I don't have it with me, Mayor.
Do you mind if somebody brings it to you, please? Thank you.
You know, I completely agree with a portion of everything that's been said here today on this council. I think every council member has brought out an element of truth. I do agree with Councilman Pate. I have always believed that we can and we should reopen our city in a safe and responsible manner. But as you know, when we visited this last, when Dr. Arfine was here, I personally made a commitment to the medical personnel of our city that I would do everything I could to help them with this issue of our city venues. I listened to them, even though perhaps there were things I didn't agree with. But they are the ones that are putting their hands on the COVID-19 patients. They're the ones putting their health and the health of their family at risk, not me. And that's why I yielded to them and tried to take their advice. I do agree with Councilman Pate that the magic number is 30. I am pleased that our numbers have dropped. But I also understand, as Sherry said, that that's probably impacted by the evacuation of the hurricane. We don't know what Labor Day is going to do to it. All that I have asked for is that we just give it a few more days to see what the numbers do. But we're trying to go in the back door, as Councilman Samuel said. I think that this is an issue, as Councilman Neal said, that we need to revisit. I do. But it needs to be a standalone and not attached to something else. I think the medical personnel should come back and give us scientific advice. All I ask for is a few days, just to see what the numbers will do after the evacuees get back in town, and we see what Labor Day is going to do to impact those numbers. And so I definitely want to open the venues in a safe and responsible manner, and I think we can. But I made a commitment personally to the medical personnel that I would listen to them, and I have to listen to them again. But they're not here today. They're not here today to give me advice. So I would encourage everybody to please be patient. Let's give it a few days to see what the numbers will do. We need to open it back up. But one more week is not going to make a difference. Thank you, Mayor.
And had we known that if it had been on the agenda today, we would have had them here, yes.
Mike, would you entertain the idea of withdrawing your amendment, knowing that we're going to address it possibly next week?
I'll withdraw the amendment.
Well, 2 council members need to put it on, so if that's what y'all are going to do, that's what you need to do. Okay.
Well, therein lies part of the problem, Mayor, because
You have go ahead.
under our rules and protocol, 3 of the council members are prohibited from seeking to put this on the agenda. So it's going to have to be.
They're prohibited because they voted the other way, is what you're meaning.
That's exactly my point.
And that was the rules that we adopted that I really honestly did not like that much.
Well, but that's what the rules are, and the rules are what they are. And it's being continuously called by some of my fellow council members as a backdoor attempt to put this on. I did not put this on the agenda to consider the Children's Museum. That was somebody else that put it on the agenda. But since somebody else did that, it is totally appropriate within the rules for me to offer an amendment, which is what I've done.
But when you do that, we didn't have the opportunity to have the medical professionals here that would be able to talk to some of the people who don't feel comfortable with it at this point.
You withdrawing the
Otherwise, we
amendment?
would've.
I did.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we're back to the original motion. You did withdraw it. So on the motion that is on the floor, which is to separate the Children's Museum from the Civic Center complex for this purpose, is what's on the floor. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Next item, please.
Mayor and Council, item number 6 is to consider a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Beaumont Independent School District regarding a school crossing guard program. The city of Beaumont entered into an interlocal agreement with the school district back in May of 2017, which called for BISD to manage and administer the program and its employees. The city agreed to provide payment for 50% of the actual cost of the program, not to exceed $90,000 per year. This agreement was for a 3-year period that ended on June the 30th. BISD is proposing that we renew the agreement with a provision that it automatically renew each year unless terminated by either party. The proposed agreement caps, again, the city's share at $90,000 per year. The agreement was attached for your review, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Council. You have heard the reading of what, number 6? Yes, number 6. Is there a motion on this item?
I so move for approval.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion?
Got a question, Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Per the City of Beaumont Charter, BISD and the City of Beaumont are divorced, is what the terminology is in the charter. I understand this program's been going on for several years, and I'm not quite clear why the City of Beaumont is paying for crossing guards for BISD and not some of the other schools in the area. What I would like to propose, because I talked to President Segee from the school board, understand that they are currently needing this money for their budget. It was already figured in their current year budget. But I would like to propose a 3-year deal that is not renewable and do $90,000 this year, $45,000 next year, and $22,500 the third year, but that 4th year not renew the contract.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Are you amending the motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so there now is an amendment. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Would you like to repeat it?
No, sir.
I don't think we have to have a second on the amendment. That was correct.
Right. Question. Okay, so let me make sure I understand. You have talked to Thomas Segee, the president of the school board, and is he okay with this proposal?
His words were, I do not think I would have a problem with that.
Okay.
Go ahead. You have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Kyle, could you give us a little history of our relationship with BISD and how that sort of came about? Because I know the average citizen out here is wondering, how is it that we're paying for school guards, crossing guards for BISD and not other schools in the area? But give them the history, because we had been, well, I'll let you do it.
Well, going back 20-plus years, the city of Beaumont used to administer this program out of the Public Works Department and also Human Resources. The city would hire the employees, train the employees, and BISD at one time would pay half the cost. And that was changed back in 2017. And I just read to you what the terms were of that agreement that expired in June. So BISD has sent over this proposed agreement that's attached for your review. So it's worked different ways over the years, and the city has split the costs with the school district going back decades.
Okay, so the city clerk just told me that Thomas Segee is here. I believe that he wanted to speak on item number 6. I'm not sure if he got here late or if he just didn't come in. I'm not sure. Okay, so I have told the city clerk that he can go ahead and speak on this item before we take a vote. Mr. Segee, hi, come on in, please. And I believe you wanted to speak on number 6, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I take my hat off to the great job you all done during the Hurricane Laura.
Thank you.
I did talk to Councilman Neal concerning this, but I actually don't have any authority to agree with that plan. The continued relationship that we have between the city and the school district is important. As you know, we often help you all in emergencies. With the hurricanes, we've done it with Ike, we've done it with Rita, we've done it with each one. We provide something that you all can't actually do, and that's the movement of people out of zones when the water is above 30 inches, because our buses can actually afford water. You all don't have that capability. We also use Central High School as a shelter when you all cannot provide a shelter. This time we use Westbrook as a point of origin so that we can load people and get on the buses that were going out of town. You know, I would like the memorandum for record to stay the same if you all can help us. If not, we'll look at that sliding scale. But in order to continue with the good relationship, I think that you should approve the memorandum as is. Again, we have a great relationship. We're trying to build a relationship with you all. And the crossing guards are very, very important, especially if you see those two guys on Dowling Street from Marshall.
That wave.
They put their heart and soul into the program. And again, we facilitate the partnership between the district and the city of Beaumont. And if you cannot do the contract as is, we'll look at what Councilman Neal said. But again, we have a great relationship. And again, I thank you all as we continue to build a bridge as opposed to a fence between the city and the school district. I appreciate what you can do for the district.
Yes.
And again, if anything that I can do to help the city of Beaumont, don't hesitate to make that happen.
Yes.
Thank you all. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Mr. Seguin. Before you leave, I echo what you said, and I'm sorry that I haven't called you. I should have already, but the school district was very, very involved with us through all the storms, but most recently with Laura. And we had to put a separate plan together if we did have to shelter in place with the social guidelines. And y'all were great to work with, to use classrooms and whatever else we needed,
Yep.
along with the buses. So just please take that back to whomever and let them know.
Yeah, I'll talk with Superintendent Allen. Again, it's a mutual relationship that, again, the city and the school district should work hand in hand in anything that we could possibly do, because the citizens, I got 17,542 of your citizens as the president of the school board. We got that many of your citizens. Some of them are this tall right now. Some are 4 years old, but they are our citizens.
Yes, sir.
And we need to do what's best for them.
Yes, sir.
Once
Thank you.
again, thanks.
And thank you for coming. Okay, so there is an amendment on the floor. Did you repeat that, or would you please, just so we hear it again?
For a 3-year deal, $90,000, which is the full dollar amount for the first year, $45,000 the second year, and $22,500 the third year, and not renewing after that.
Okay,
Mayor?
Yes.
I do have a comment.
okay.
I think it's significant that what Mr. President just mentioned, that these are our citizens. The streets, these are the streets of Beaumont. And historically, we've had a good relationship with BISD for the most part. We've been able to work with other programs, joint programs with BISD. But this is one that when we entered that agreement back in 2017, I felt very good about, because one, these are our citizens. Two, these are some of our future leaders. And three, these are the streets of Beaumont. We can put that on someone else to do their responsibility, eliminate part of ours. But I believe it's a part of our responsibilities to make the streets as safe as possible. The amount that we've been contributing toward that I think it's a very good investment. It's an investment in our city, it's an investment in our children, and it's an investment in our co-partners in building a better Beaumont. And because of that, that's why I felt it was a good program then. And I believe it's still a good program now, because those conditions have not changed. They're still our citizens, they're still our children, they're still our futures.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Pate?
Kyle, when we first started this 25 years ago, did BISD have a police department at all?
No.
Wasn't that one of the reasons that we did it, is because they didn't have any facilities like that? Just to put a historical perspective on.
I'm not sure when the city started. I can just tell you that 25 plus years ago, the city was administering the program up until 2017.
And what changed then? Just so everybody knows. I'm thinking that we changed it. We took some of our responsibility away in 17, but paid the whole amount.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Because they worked directly for us, if I remember right.
Yeah, what started the discussion, but.
And that was a part of it, the fact that BISD had acquired a police department. That was a consideration.
That's why we did it, right. Because I think they were our employees before, is that right? And they're not now, we just pay
Correct.
$90,000 a year. And that's for all of them, right? Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
I do believe that we all, I believe we're all in agreement that the partnership between the city and the school district is vital. If Beaumont's going to move forward as a community, we need a strong school district. I'm not sure what $90,000 a year does to their budget or to ours. I guess I've seen this as a house cleaning item where we have been slowly detaching ourselves through the years, and I understand this is the last tether that we have. But I hope that the school district doesn't interpret today's vote, whichever way it goes, as a lack of support for our school district, because we do support our school district. And I know as a council, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they're a success, although we're very limited in what we can do. But I would just hate for the school district to think that today's vote is a message that we don't support them, because I know that we do. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor,
Yes.
so with the advent of more and more charter schools and, of course, the parochial schools that we have, my concern is, okay, so we're going to do this for BISD, fine. I echo everybody's sentiments that we need to maintain a good relationship with BISD, but how do we differentiate between BISD and other schools that have children walk into their facilities that might also need crossing guards? What are we going to do about that when we're approached by other institutions of learning saying we need help, for instance, with All Saints over there on, I guess it's Delaware, or, you know, I think Councilmember Neal, your brother-in-law has a school over there on Old Calder. So how do we deal with those situations?
Well, I would say my decision would be based on the fact that one is public and the other is private. There's a difference between those who have and those who have not. So those who have the ability to go to private schools, that's one thing. That's different for those who have not. That's in my assessment. You asked how I would feel? That's how I distinguish the difference.
No, but the problem with that is that you can go to charter schools for free, and it's not based on have or have not. It's based on the person's individual decisions. So that really, I agree with you on parochial schools. You might have to pay a tuition, but on these charter schools, they simply take the funding that BISD would have received and they give them to the charter school. So, you know, that's not a have and have not situation. So again, back to my question.
Are you asking me a question?
Well, I'm just throwing that out there. I'll ask the city manager.
I understand what you're saying is different. I will say one of the things that one of the other factors I would consider is what you just said. You said we should do everything possible within our means to assist with BISD. And that's the relationship that some people have had to have tried to have over the years. This is one part of that, a relationship with our public school district.
Okay, yeah.
Mr. Manager, if a charter school needed crossing guards, would that be something you would just simply bring to council and
Yes.
let us?
I can answer that. Go ahead. You would.
No, if a charter school, approached me making that request, a charter school or private school, I'd bring that to the city council for your consideration.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Pate.
Thank you. I'd ask Councilman Neal if he'd reconsider his amendment to say, to do this for 1 year, let's sit down and visit with BISD so that everybody's on the same page from this time forward. Would that be something that you think would be reasonable? Basically, we're giving them the $90,000 we agreed to. We're just gonna sit down with them and say, because as you said, you talked to Thomas, and he said he would be open to it, but I think it should be something the school board's gonna say yes or no. He's president, but they still have to vote on it, but it might be something that if we went ahead and did it for the next year, it'd give us a whole year to sit down and visit with them, if you would consider that.
Councilmember Neal, before you answer that, I was right after Councilmember Pate spoke. My comment was going to be, I'm not in favor of your amendment at all. However, I would have rather that we talk to the superintendent, the board, and have, just like what we're talking about on the other, have all the information before we did that. And I'm just reiterating. I'm going to vote for it as it stands today, but as far as the motion to change it or the amendment, I would vote against the amendment today, not against the amendment. But I feel like that we need the opportunity to explore this with the powers to be over at BISD.
Well, then why don't we table it until next week?
Is there a reason that we can't do that?
No, ma'am, you can table it.
But we can go ahead and vote as it's written, because what you are proposing is to do as it stands for 1 year, correct? That's how I understood it.
Yeah, but if we're gonna do the contract, we might as well do it. And I think that if we could have a week to go back and visit with them and try to get something that we can have a 3-year deal and be done with it, rather than kicking the can down the road, I think it'd be better.
Well, I wasn't saying that we shouldn't bring it back next week. I think we should. I was just saying that since it's already posted, we could. But that's up to the council. I don't have any, I just can't vote for the amendment today. So, did you want to pull it? Do you want to?
Table it
Do
till
we
next
have
week.
do we have any reason that we have to vote on this today?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anybody that's opposed to tabling it until next week? So, I suppose that it'll be written as it is now, and then the amendment would be made again, because this is your recommendation? Or do you want to talk with them and see?
Yeah, this is highly unusual for council members to go broker a deal
Yeah.
with any entity, really. So I don't know how we'd move forward.
I would, well, then let's say this. Could I ask that at least staff go and talk and see what they say, or legal, if you want to say something, please, Mr. Cooper?
Actually, Mary, you got motions on the floor.
Yeah.
The way the contract's written, it's an annual contract that renews annually unless it's terminated by either party. So you'll have a 1-year contract going forward if you approve it today as written.
And then we could bring back, moving forward with it. Is that would be the cleaner way?
That'll give time to negotiate another deal for the next year, if that's the council's wish.
Okay, so you've pulled your amendment for now, correct?
Assuming we're gonna wait till next week to vote on this.
Okay, I never had so many amendments in my life. I'm sorry. Okay, so if y'all want to pull it, we can pull it, or we can vote on this amendment. It does not matter to me. My vote's going to be the same either way. Anybody have a problem with pulling it? Okay, if there's not, then we'll go ahead and pull it. And so this item is tabled till next week. Next item, please. Oh, we have a public hearing, right?
Yes, ma'am. Item number 7 before the public hearing. We have an ordinance entitled, an ordinance finding certain properties to be a public health nuisance and ordering abatement, authorizing cleanup, authorizing suit, providing for severability, and providing for a penalty. And our public health director, Sherry Omer, will come forward and lead you through the item.
Okay, good afternoon again. The Health Department is presenting 3 properties that we have determined to be public health nuisances. After many attempts by Code Enforcement Division to bring these 3 properties into compliance, Code Enforcement referred the property to us at Public Health for assessment at the end of June. On initial visit by our environmental health manager, it was determined that these properties were indeed public health nuisances, and written notices were sent to the property owners by regular mail, certified mail, and hand-delivered on July 10th. At that time, the owners were given an additional 30 days to comply with the ordinance and abate their properties. The properties were all reassessed on August 10th after 30 days, and it was determined at that time, though a couple of the properties had made some improvement, all 3 of the properties remained public health nuisances. So we'll walk through the pictures and the violations. 1801 North Street, the violations there are excessive litter, rodent harborage, and violation of weed ordinance. Here are the pictures. Code Enforcement really worked with us too on taking a lot of these pictures. So we have pictures from as far back as the beginning of the year up until a point where we reassessed the property by Public Health on August 10th. Any questions on that property?
Question, is it fair to assume that we've had a lot of neighbors complaining about these properties?
We've had a lot of complaints. Code Enforcement has had a lot of complaints about the properties, yes. The next property is 1230 Chamberlain Drive. The violations there are excessive litter, rodent harborage, and no access to approved sewage. There was at one point a couple of trailers, from what we understand, on the property that had no water connection, and there's no sewage connection on the property as well. This was one of the properties where there was some improvement, but as you can see, the property remains a public health nuisance. Again, we had a lot of complaints about this property as well. And then the last property is 3035 West Lucas. The violations are excessive litter and rodent harborage. This is the front yard of the property, but here are other pictures from the opposite side. The owner of this property did attempt to make some changes. There was a little improvement, but as you can see, this property still remains a public health nuisance. Any questions about this property?
Council? No? Thank you.
Sherry, just help everyone understand, this Lucas address. I know they cleaned up a little bit. I live close to there, and it's, I don't know when, since that picture was taken, it's gone the other way again. It's gotten worse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we know.
I do too.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So we're asking you to agree with us that these properties are public health nuisances so that we can move forward with attempting to get the owners to abate these properties.
Okay, and we have to have a public hearing on this, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Elmore. Okay, you read the caption, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing now. If you would like to speak before we vote on item number 7, the time to do so is now. And if you haven't already done so, please fill out the green slip and hand it to the officer. She will bring you in here. We would appreciate, again, if you keep your comments to 3 minutes.
We have Gilbert Valdez, 1230 Chamberlain Drive, Beaumont, Texas.
Okay, Gilbert Valdez, is he here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Gal. Yes, sir?
Mayor Ames, yes, ma'am. Just here speaking of my property, everything that's been decided on has been under false alleged accusations, and with no proof of much. And lost 3 generations of my family's work. It's Valdez in Alaska, it's Valdez down here in the United States. And I've been accused as a drug dealer, elderly abuser, abandoner, and all that stuff, and it's just all lies, you know. I was taking care of my father. We're moving to Chamberlain, where I have my DBA at, my business or a business address. Take care of him, and we got ran off our property by the enforcement saying we weren't allowed on our own property. You know, because the house is red tagged, which the city hadn't even stepped in yet. You know, it's all everything's rooted from then. That kind of leads to where we're at now. You know, and it's been just total lies, and from the community and everything. I just want to come here to talk about that.
Okay, is there anything that was given in our report that you want to dispute then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's the root of it, you know. I'm just trying to be honest with you.
Which
just
part?
The root of it, just where it all started, just, me being labeled as that. And that's what kind of led to all this now, you know. And, there's no proof of us having water and lights over there over 50 years, and it's the opposite. I've done all the legwork, long story short, a whole briefcase full of stuff, and I'm having to follow through with, protecting my family, following through with what I need to do civilly. I've already about to file here on myself, open up a case myself, because I'm the last person fighting for my property, So, long story short, everything's been unfair, I took care of my father for 7 years and ran my business at the same time with my mother and my wife, and it's all been lies. I didn't believe my father when he said he'd be attacked over there, and now I do. It's a bunch of lies of the community. They don't want us there. There's a church across the street trying to expand. There's property behind me, one that start an apartment complex, and I'm in the middle.
Does anybody have any questions before he goes, please?
I do.
Go
Long
ahead.
story short, sir.
Mr. Valdez,
Yes, sir.
I've been by that property. You've got a number of trailers over on that property. It's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And those trailers are in a state of what appear to be disrepair, both as seen on the pictures and both what I have personally observed. Do you understand why your neighbors would be upset with the condition that your property is in?
I'm a caretaker for my father, and you're allowed to have a trailer if you're a caretaker for one, for an elderly person, and those trailers that I brought on the property were just for storage for my materials to build my home again that got tore down unlawfully. I have tools in one, the other one I invested the whole summer into, all my savings. And then the third one it's a $16,000 Gulf Breeze Gulfstream trailer, travel trailer that the Allegro hooks up to. And they all have tanks on them for sewage. All of them do, and all electrical works in them. But I wasn't living in them. So
Mayor, I have a
And they're
question.
gone now.
I have a question for Mr. Boone. What does our code of ordinances say about having trailers in a residentially zoned neighborhood like that?
If you don't mind, Mr. Valdez, if you might take a seat right there on the front, and if we have any questions for you, okay?
Yeah, so unless waived by the city council after a storm, for example, Harvey, a long-term occupancy of a RV outside of an RV park, so in this case, in a residential district is a violation of the zoning ordinance.
And are the trailers still there? I think Mr. Valdez said that they've been removed.
And I'm residing also.
Yeah. Okay, the trailers are gone?
The building is still there.
Okay, so there are the trailers, it sounds like the trailers are gone as of today, but there is a portable building which was not permitted and is also in violation.
Okay. Are there other violations there besides the portable building that you know of right now?
As of Friday, there was litter and the violations listed by Ms. Ulmer, but apparently the RVs have been pulled out over the weekend.
Mr. Valdez, did you pull them out over the weekend or within the last week?
It wasn't over the weekend, but I pulled them out, yes, sir, and that building is a house. You know, it's not a built building, it's got electrical, plumbing, everything in it. I paid for it to move there. I couldn't afford to do permits in a house. I started the house first. If I wasn't aware of the permit situation, I didn't know, I'm new to this. On that, I got the permits first, you know. But, and I'm gonna have to move it again, get the permits and get some of the site plan, all that goes back, which y'all have already.
Yeah, again, no permit has been issued, no inspections of any electrical system or plumbing system or the condition of the structure, in other words, meeting the International Residential Code. None of that's been done because no permit has been applied for.
And how long have we been dealing with this particular address, if you can recall?
We pulled records, for our charges within our offices, complaints to the city municipal court, we have 11 different violations, some going back to 1983. Let's see. But I would say, in terms of dealing with these immediate issues, at least for the last year.
Thank you.
So, you had your hand up. Did you have something for Chris?
I was just gonna ask how many different violations it's had
Okay.
in the past couple years.
That's all? Okay.
And then, Chris, what's the no access to approved sewage? Is that just for the trailers and the house?
Again, it sounds like the house as well, because again, we have not been able to permit or inspect what kind of system is out there. But
Question. Mr. Valdez, do you have city water at that house now?
I do, well, not city, but I have a commercial grade, it's a 3,800 PSI with steamer, a pressure washing rig on the property. I have that, and I have, you know, a tank for whatever I need to pump in there, 350 gallon tank.
Someone's living in that building?
No, sir.
Okay. So,
I'm trying to just fix it up, you know, trying to go by the rules, you know, as I learn how to do them. I'm not, you know, trained in all this shitty rule stuff, you know.
So, where do you get the water that's in the tank?
From the city, from my friends, and you know.
Like they fill it up for you?
Ma'am?
They fill it up for you?
They give it to me, yes, ma'am, they know my situation, they just give it to me. A lot of everybody I know that's come to give me stuff, because they know what's going on. A lot of witnesses testify, a lot of them.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions for Mr. Valdez? Okay, thank you, sir. You can, they'll show you where to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all I have here.
Okay, so there's no other citizens to speak in this public hearing for item number 7, and I believe the caption has been read. So is there a motion on item number 7?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no more discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. And next, public hearing again before item number 8. Right, sir?
Mayor and Council, item number 8 is to consider a resolution adopting the reinvestment zone tax abatement policy for the city of Beaumont. The city of Beaumont utilizes a variety of economic development tools in order to encourage development within the city and within its extraterritorial jurisdiction. Each project is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. One such tool is a reinvestment zone tax abatement policy as allowed under the Texas Tax Code. And in order to offer abatements, the city must periodically readopt its abatement policy. The reinvestment zone tax abatement policy remains unchanged from the last adoption back in 2016. However, changes to Chapter 312 by the Texas Legislature during the last session now requires that a public hearing be held before the adoption of the policy. So the administration recommends that you hold a public hearing, and then we recommend approval.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open the floor for the public hearing before item number 8 as read.
I don't have any, Mayor.
Okay, there's no one that has expressed interest in speaking in this public hearing. So I'll move for a motion, or ask for a motion from council, please.
So moved.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion or questions? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. And we have a couple of work sessions today.
We have 2. The first work session, Mayor and Council, is to review and discuss the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget. And we have a PowerPoint presentation. So the proposed 2021 budget, we have a $290 million total budget. And just to walk through these hitting the highlights. This proposed budget maintains the existing tax rate at 71 cents. There's not an increase in water or sewer rates. Not an increase in garbage rates. We did add 2 paramedic positions and 2 EMT positions to allow for better staffing. And that's an estimated new cost of $360,000. And the budget provides for a 3.5% increase in wages for police officers per their collective bargaining agreement. It's an estimated new cost, $900,000. There is not an increase for civilian employees or for firefighters. However, we are negotiating a new contract with the fire union. That's ongoing. This proposed budget maintains the existing level of services despite COVID-19 and other revenue challenges. We have a very strong fund balance in the general fund, and that's really what's allowed for a continuation of existing services without, for example, a tax increase. There's some other factors as well, but that's the main reason. The projected starting fund balance, as you can see, is almost $45 million, which is 34% of projected expenditures. So some of the challenges we are facing, this budget at this time has a projected $3.7 million deficit. Sales taxes are 32% of general fund revenues. You can see estimated at $41 million next year. It's 11% less than what we received in 2019. Since March of this year, sales tax revenue is $2 million less than for the same 6 months in 2019. Sales tax, our largest source of revenue. Police, fire, and EMS expenditures are 59% of expenditures in the general fund. They continue to grow each year. The CARES Act supplemental public transportation funding provided funds for our transit system for fiscal year 2021. So the general fund budget is not planning to make that normal transfer that's normally between 2.2 million to 2.6 million. So the proposed budget deficit would have been much higher if those funds were not available. So a transfer will likely be needed, or will be needed, we believe, in fiscal year 2022. Take a look at this. If you go back 20 years, those were those ending fund balances. And where we are today. So again, the main reason that we're in a position not to ask the council to consider a tax increase or to cut any services, number one, foremost because of our fund balance and where we are today. Second, we didn't know this 2 months ago, but appraisals did go up. Property appraisals, which affects property tax revenue, went up, I believe, about 2.8%. That definitely helped. You approved refunding some of our debt, outstanding debt, and because of the tax appraisal increase and you approving the refundings, it allowed for a shift. And what I mean by that is your tax rate, that 71 cents, is apportioned roughly, let's say 50 cents to the general fund and say 21 cents to the debt service fund, which is to repay outstanding debt. There was allowed for a shift, more money to the general fund than last year. That's the third reason. And the fourth reason, again, is you do not have to make that transfer to the transit fund. If you had to do that, you're probably talking about 2.5 million on top of the 3.7 million, which I think you'd be looking at other options, including a tax increase or maybe cutting certain services. So thank goodness we do not have to do that. And we're very fortunate, again, mostly because of this fund balance that you've allowed over the years after, going back to Rita and Ike, what we learned, and that is you need to have sufficient cash on hand. And then we all know about Harvey, Imelda, what we were going through 2 weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was, with Marco and Laura, and our neighbors to the east were not spared, but we surely were. I'm very fortunate for that. But so be happy to answer any questions you have.
Councilmember Getz.
You came on board as city manager, I believe, in 2002, and since that time, our fund balance has been increased substantially, and I compliment you for your stewardship on that. One of the things that we've learned from our past hurricanes is that there is a spike in sales tax. The numbers that you read that showed that our sales tax was down this year was through August, so it did not take into account, I guess, all of the flurry of sales, hardware stores, and people in preparation for Laura and fixing up their properties after Laura. With that coming into play, even though we were spared, we did have damage, some damages here, and people I know that a lot of people were buying plywood, $30 a sheet. So do we expect that to impact our sales tax?
We do. We don't know to what degree. We're looking at it on a monthly basis, and we'll continue to track it. But yes, I think, definitely help.
Another question I have, Mayor, if I may. In November, we had a workshop at the Lakeside Center, and at that time, I posed the question about moving forward with the Dowland extension. And at that time, there were 4 council members that were seemingly willing to go ahead and authorize the expenditure funds for the engineering, not construction, but the engineering of that project. That project's been in our capital program longer than any other project. It dates back to the time of Mayor Evelyn Lord. We will never be able to know what that project is going to cost until it is engineered. And everything is just an estimate until it is engineered. What can we do to put that into the budget for fiscal year 2021 to allow for the engineering of that project?
You would need to get 4 votes to move forward with the engineering from whatever. You have to define your scope. So are you going from Highway 90 to Washington? You're going from Washington all the way to I-10, Walden? So what's your scope going to be? What do you want us to engineer? And then how do you want to pay for it? Because right now your only option is to use cash out of your fund balance.
Right, and I understand that. So to get it on the agenda for a vote, I mean, we had a consensus of 4, so do we need to have it formalized?
I don't remember a consensus for 4, but if you did have a consensus, then yes, you would make a request like you did for this work session and put it on the agenda. Tell me the who, what, when, where, why, and then see if there's 4 votes.
Okay, well, I'm making that request, and I'd like to see a work session for that.
A work session?
Well, I'd like to see it put on the agenda for a vote. You just said work session, but...
No, I didn't say work session. Meaning, do you want to have a work session or do you want to have a vote? And then define the scope for me, and then I can estimate the project with staff, and then...
I would like to see it put on the agenda for a vote to start with I-10 and go to Walden.
Okay, then I have a correction on what you said, because that has not been on our capital since Evelyn Lord was here.
No, that part was added.
That was added in the last probably 2 years. I just want to make sure that we don't mislead, because you said it had been since Evelyn Lord. That is the part from
Highway 90, from Highway 90 to
College
Walden
to
is the
Walden.
part. And then
That's been on for a long, long time.
That's been on for a long, long
But the one that
time.
you're asking for has only been on for maybe a couple years.
That's true. We added on Walden to
clarify.
I-10. I agree with that.
So,
From Walden to I-10 in engineering, to have a vote on the engineering of that.
it's a proposed $30 million project without water and sewer. So let me know who your second is, and I'll put it on probably for a work session is what I would advise. And these engineering projects, the engineering's negotiated, but you can count on 6% to 10% for sure.
I was going to say 10.
And so then how are you going to pay for it? That's going to be the key question for the council.
Now, Mr. Manager, previously, when Dr. Maggiolani was here, he had said that all this could be engineered in-house, except for the bridge. And I don't think this portion of the project even has to cross a ditch. I don't think that. So he was talking about doing it in-house, but you're talking about now going out for bid for it?
Yes, we've had some staff leave that office, and I'd feel much more comfortable contracting that out.
All right.
Councilmember Neal, you had something?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Manager, on the Municipal Transit Fund, page 159, and this might be more of a Todd question, not sure. For the budgeted 2020 under expenditures, we were at 5.7. For budgeted for 2021, for expenditures, it's 9.5. Can you explain the big difference on there? It looks like it's under the capital outlay, but not quite sure what that is.
Yeah, that's vehicles and equipment, an estimated, let's see, almost 4.7 million. Is that new buses, Chris, or?
The 4.7 is contract services, 3.8 is capital outlay.
Yeah, you know what's in the 3.8?
It's 6 buses, a roof repair, and 4 of the smaller vehicles, buses.
4 small STS buses and 4 STS special transit service buses and 6 big buses? Okay.
All right, can you also explain, under total revenues for 2020, it was 5.2 and going to 8.2 for 2021?
We're getting the CARES funding to help fund operations and some of the buses.
Is that the intergovernmental revenues from 2.6 to 7.9?
Correct.
Okay. Can you also explain why it goes from 2.6 on the budget, budgeted for 2020 to estimated at 4.9?
That's the CARES as well.
Okay. One other question I have, on page 148, solid waste fund. Just curious why under the, for budgeted for 2020, it was 14 million under expenditures, and then for 2021, it's down to 12.6. So what is that, 1.4 decrease?
Debt services decreased quite a bit, and the capital expenditures. I think we bought a lot of equipment last year with cash, trucks that we don't have to do in 2021.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all, Councilmember?
That's it, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Speaking to the CARES Act that is going to help us with our public transit for this coming year, one of the things that I had discussed possibly doing with our public transit service is having a study done to see how many people actually use our bus service. And I've had it explained to me that there's a possibility that we can use some of that CARES Act funding to pay for that sort of study. What do we need to do in order to make that happen?
You need to get 4 votes and lay out what you want to do, and then the council will consider it.
Okay, so I will come to you with whoever's going to second that, and we can, do you know whether or not it's been determined we can use some of the CARES Act funding for that?
I think we can, Chris is saying.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And also, I need to know who your second is in writing for engineering, possibly the Dallin extension.
So,
I will provide that to you.
in regard to that, the CARE Acts, I know that we got, because we were talking about that there's some for rental assistance, all different kinds of things that we got, and there was a lump sum of money that could be used for certain things and another for that. And some of the questions were answered that why it changed year over year was because of that CARE Act funding. Has all of the CARE Act funding that we believe that we are going to get been utilized in this budget?
Now, we have not received some of it.
Okay, so we're not budgeting it until we know that we're getting it, correct? So as we find out, then that's when we figure out what we can use it for and what it would be best suited for. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So with what Councilmember Getz just said, the CARE Act Act money may be able to be used for
Well,
that, but we don't know
Have
how
we
much more we're
received
gonna get.
all of the transportation portion? Okay, so if Councilmember gets, meaning the
Two
council
people.
can decide to utilize that money any way you like, including a study.
But I
So-
thought we already said we were gonna put it into the buses and all that in this budget.
True, so
we'd have
you're
to
just
take
gonna,
it-
if, let's say you go spend X amount of money on a study, then you're just gonna have less money
somewhere else.
to help with operations and so forth. You'd have to come up with that money next year as part of your transfer.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is all of the CARE Act funding that is in regard to transportation has been not expended, but received, and we've said, or we know we're getting it, and we've said where it's gonna go. So if the council does vote to spend however much it is to do this study, it will have to come from one of those areas that we've already put it into the budget, right?
Let me work with staff and see how it's all earmarked right now.
I just wanna
It's,
understand what we're voting on.
It's roughly
before it comes-
almost $6.3 million. And we can tell you what's been earmarked to date and maybe what's available, but we could do that if he can get a second and lay out what he's trying to do.
Okay.
And Mayor, I'm
Yes.
sorry, can you, I guess you have no way of knowing how much this kind of a study would cost? Have we ever done anything like this before?
We have,
Can you give me a ballpark?
you know, it was paid
been a long
for
time
with,
ago.
I don't remember how it was paid for. It was not the city of Beaumont, but I think maybe there were federal or state funds available, and the Regional Planning Commission, the Southeast Texas Regional Planning Commission, utilized that money, hired a very reputable group from outside the state that does this all over the country, and we still have the study. It's probably 10-plus years,
It is.
old, but we have it, and it made some really good recommendations, and the council at that time did not implement any of them.
And what was the dollar?
You mean for the study? or-
Yeah,
Approximately 150,000.
thank you.
What year was that?
Okay.
There was a 2008, I believe, and then we did an update in 2010.
Any other questions for the city manager on this item? Okay. So that concludes our first work session.
Yeah.
We
Thank
have
you.
one
There's
more.
a second work session that was requested, I believe, by council members Getz and Neal, and it related to panhandling and also homeless camps around the city. So I'm going to hand out some information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I'm handing out is Transportation Code, which is actually state law. And then there's an ordinance behind it, which is the city of Beaumont's. And what you have before you in parentheses is, again, state law. Just let you read that. It's pretty short. And then when you go to page 3, it's just one section that's in parentheses, and that's the city of Beaumont's current code of ordinance language.
Okay.
Mr. Manager, you gave me two of them.
Okay.
So on the third page, how does this pertain to like nonprofits?
They have to get a.
They have to get a permit through our police department, and it lays out the process down there in section 12.05.003. And we have staff here that administers that. Works pretty well. Police department does an excellent job of processing that and working with people.
Just like when they have to get a parade permit or.
Yes, ma'am.
anything like that.
Do you have the authority to waive the fee payment if a nonprofit asks?
he says unless it's,
I'm looking at fee payment in the sum of $200, cash or money order only, to defray the city's cost of both processing the application and advertising and compliance monitoring on the street. This fee is not refundable unless the permit is denied. And then there's also a requirement of written proof of liability insurance in the minimum amounts of $250,000. You know, I think we've all seen charitable organizations, whether it be a Little League or soccer or something out there on the medians. I seriously doubt if they've gotten liability insurance that, and probably not a permit. So is this an enforcement issue or what?
what are you referring to as far as the
Well,
enforcement issue?
When we're talking about charitable organizations,
Yeah, they're supposed to get a permit, and if I drive around the city, the chief knows that I've called him many times on a Saturday or Sunday, just saying, hey, there's a group out here, Dallin and Old Dallin, you know, without a vest on, do they have a permit? And they'll send an officer and take the proper steps. So people are supposed to get a permit, secure a permit. Most of the time, if they've been through this before, they do. There are groups that, you know, don't sometimes. It happens. And when we see it, we are nice about it, but try to tell people, hey, this is the rules, and this is what you need to follow. And
So, but the purpose for this is for the panhandling of the individuals that are more so on the street corner. They don't have to get a permit, but it's not legal for them to do that.
That's correct.
So, what happens, I mean, what, the police just ask them to move on, or?
the chief here is Jim, I think Jim Clay's here to speak to this, but the police department is out and issues citations for violations of both of these laws, for lack of a better word. You know, and if a citation's issued and they don't show up at court, there's a warrant out for their arrest. There are cases where the police department will make an arrest for these violations, or this violation in particular. So we're here to answer any questions that you have. Council members requested this work session, so the appropriate staff is here.
Question? This is for the city attorney. Are there currently any court cases that would impact these city ordinances or the state transportation code from a constitutionality standpoint, or that would otherwise make these ordinances or the state transportation code unenforceable?
Yes.
There are?
Yes.
Can you speak to those?
I don't have a listing of them, but I know that there are cases all over the country where city ordinances are being challenged as being unconstitutional.
Any that apply to this jurisdiction?
Jurisdiction as the city of Beaumont or the state of Texas, the Fifth Circuit, which means
As to the city of Beaumont?
that our ordinance has not been challenged.
Okay. Has the transportation code for the state of Texas been challenged?
I'm not aware that it has been.
So at the present time, there are no, to your knowledge, court cases that would impact the enforcement of the state transportation code or the city ordinances?
I'm not aware of a challenge to the state transportation code. There is no challenge presently to the city's ordinance.
Okay. So then what we're talking about, if we're not under any prohibition from a court challenge, we're talking about enforcement. And I guess it would be incumbent upon us as a city council to provide policy as to what we would like to see done with regard to enforcement of these. And, you know, look, I know the times are hard for people. There's a guy that plays the guitar every day at the corner of College and Dallin. You know, he's like you've seen in lots of places, got a hat out there, and he'll take contributions. Not hurting anybody, but it's a danger. Yeah, it's a danger to himself. You know, we need to be consistent, and we need to just decide how we as a city council would like to see us respond to the panhandling that is going on. And, you know, I know that there was a time there, and the police have done a great job at the corner of College and I-10, where people were getting downright,
Aggressive.
yeah, belligerent's a good word, because they would seek a contribution or something. If you didn't get, they'd throw something at your car. And I had several reports of people having damage to their vehicles. And again, Chief, great job in getting those people moved on down the road. Thank you. But you know, they just move from one place to another. And so I think we need to decide what is our stance going to be on that.
Good question, Mayor.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think there's any doubt that the panhandling in Beaumont is getting worse than what it was. And you know, once again, I appreciate what the Beaumont PD is doing on it as well. I'd like to hear from you guys and see if there's something else that we can be doing different up here that would help you guys do your job better.
We've asked, I have asked Chief Clay to.
Hey, Chief.
Would one of y'all come up, please? I know you didn't want to, but
We know how modest you are, Jimmy.
if you don't come, we'll arrest you. Thank you, Chief. And Chief
Good
Clay, too.
afternoon. As you all know, we've tried to address this problem over the last 9 years, and it seems like sometimes when we take enforcement action, we get criticized, and when we don't, we get criticized. So that being said, I have asked Chief Clay to research this, and he can give you some ideas of what's going on in other cities and what happens when we actually do enforce it. Chief Clay?
Okay, we started working, we've been working on this problem, like the Chief said, for years. Our traffic division started focusing on this at the end of June. So I've got some ideas, give you some ideas of what we've been doing since June 26th to basically this past week. They were concentrating on especially the violations of the state law, which the state law really prohibits them from stepping out into the roadway, which is a big safety issue, both for the public and for the people that are out there. So they've made 187 contacts. They issued 102 verbal warnings, 66 citations, and have made 6 arrests. That's what our traffic division has done out there, focusing on those problems. And like the biggest location as far as contacts made were at that Gulf and MLK I-10 area. There was 31 documented interactions there, 22 at College and I-10. I'm just going over some of the most frequent locations. 5 at Dowell and East Tex, 4 at Calder and I-10, and 4 at 11th and I-10. But that just kind of gives you the idea that it is throughout the city, along the freeway especially. But what also we're seeing is as we increase enforcement, they're moving further off the freeway to some of the locations that are even closer to neighborhoods. Many of these people are homeless. Enforcement is not really a big deterrent to them, because even if they do go to jail, they get a bath, a good meal, place to sleep for the night, and then they're released the next day. Whether it's a new arrest for a warrant or for a new charge, they spend one night and they're released for credit for time served the next day. So we really need to look at this as a bigger issue than just enforcement. That's going to be a challenge for the entire city, because we can't police our way out of this situation. I don't feel arresting a lot of people is going to make a difference. I think that we need to look at a bigger and broader issue with multiple organizations within the community that can really make a difference on this. You talked about case law. There's been quite a few challenges throughout the United States on ordinances governing solicitation. And that all stemmed from a court case, Supreme Court case in 2015 of Reed versus the City of Gilbert, which you can look up. And basically, It talked about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and they're using this, which is a church message case, but they're also using that as part of the solicitation, whereas your right to solicit is a First Amendment right. So that has been challenged and upheld, I think, in the 2nd, 9th, and 10th circuits. It has not been seen in the 5th Circuit yet, but there are some challenges being made in other cities in the 5th Circuit, so they've yet been decided. So it is something that when we look at making an enforcement, that we want to do what's right for the community and for the person, even if we do make an arrest, that arrest will not be challenged. So that's one of the reasons we've been really focusing on the state law, because it definitely addresses stepping into the roadway, which is a big hazard, versus alongside the roadway soliciting. So again, we've been committing the resources. Just the traffic division has documented 178 man-hours for this project. So we have made some differences. You've seen, like College and I-10. So we're going to continue to work on that. Is there any specific questions that you may have?
Council, anything for Chief Clay?
I do.
Yes.
In your contacts, are your officers able to develop enough of a feel to decide whether or not these people have mental health issues, homeless issues, or if this is just the chosen occupation for some of them? Because I've heard anecdotal stories that some of these people are not, in effect, homeless, but they actually do pretty good making money out there. It seems to me that it does need to be part of a bigger conversation, especially the part talking about homelessness, and that because that's a whole other issue. But it all gets down to whether it's this or the homeless. I feel like some sort of a registry needs to be developed so we can kind of keep track of who we're dealing with. But to my question, do you have any feel for whether or not your officers have developed?
Not directly as far as homelessness or whether they're choosing this as a lifestyle. I think mental health-wise, we all have mental health training, and we're all very much aware of what goes on in the community, and we'd make quite a few referrals through Spindletop. So if the officers feel like it's a mental health issue, that they're a danger to themselves, that we do take action on that.
Anybody else have any questions for Chief Clay? Okay. Thank you, Chief. We appreciate it.
The second part of the work session was the homeless camps that we're aware of. We're all aware of the one at Interstate 10 and MLK, Interstate 10, 7th Street underpass. There's some on private property that y'all are aware of. There's a camp we've talked about many times over on Washington underneath Drainage District 6 and City of Beaumont ditch. And then there's another camp. It's under a bridge, right off the bridge actually, and under the bridge on College, just west of Interstate 10. So that was the second part of the work session that was requested today. And
what if they are on private property?
if they're on private property, then they need to get a no trespass warrant. And then what that does, they file it with the Beaumont Police Department, and then the police department has a mechanism to enforce. What they normally do, they tell me, is they go out and talk to them first and say, look, you're on this, or can you give me proof of ownership? You're on this property, living here, there's a no trespass warrant filed, and then they'll go back the next day, and if they're still there, take the appropriate action. So we have businesses that have filed that warrant with the city that we enforce. So that's one mechanism on private property. That's really the only reason or means for us to go on that private property and bring about any type of enforcement.
So in other words, someone who owned like a wooded area in a neighborhood off of Magnolia, wherever it might be, allows it to be there, there's nothing that we can do?
You can do more. I mean, you could, and the council has considered, I forget how many years ago it was, maybe 5 or so years ago, staff brought to you what was called a no camping ordinance. So you could not camp on property unless you owned it.
Because
About public health nuisance.
About what?
A public health nuisance.
We would bring that against the owner, and we could do that. So, but to answer your question, Mayor, staff brought this no camping ordinance, again, maybe 5 years or so, and the council, there were not 4 votes to move forward with it.
So if there is a owner that is trying to do what he believes to be the right thing and be benevolent and allow people to camp on his property because he thinks it's, you know, the right thing to do, but it's causing a mess and wreaking havoc for nearby citizens, the stick we have with him is saying, look, you can do it, but we're going to take action against you and move to declare it a public health nuisance, and you're going to be responsible. Is that right?
That's correct. So that's a good idea.
I guess
And
unless they keep it
so
clean.
if you know the locations, please tell us. And staff that's here today will go out, starting tomorrow, we'll go out, do like they did today and bring these to you. If, number one, you have to give them notice, and if they do not correct it, then we move forward like what was brought before you today. So we need your help. Tell us where those properties are, and just send that email or to me, and staff will go out the next day, check it, and we'll go from there.
What do you
I've got 2 right here, 7th Street and I-10 and MLK Street and I-10.
Those are owned by the Texas
That's
Department of
TxDOT.
Transportation.
That's not private.
It's very different.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
Can
real
they be cited as creating a public health nuisance, or do they have immunity?
If we file, would they come here and talk to us at the meeting?
Oh, they've been here before to
Yeah.
talk to you about it, yeah.
Not that long ago,
So
remember?
there's nothing we can do to them?
there is. There is from a standpoint of if you want to clean it up, we can clean it up, and we could probably go to them and ask if they'd be willing to share in the cost, but that needs to start with the 7 of you. You know, do you want us to clean up those properties? The city attorney is telling us you cannot touch their tents or their belongings or remove their property. You can, however, go pick up the litter and debris on the site. We can do that. We have, we've cleaned up some other sites, as y'all know, so there is a real cost.
There's a cost to it.
There's a cost to it, and Drainage District 6 shared that cost with us 50/50. I don't know if TxDOT be willing to do that or not, because
You reached out to them and asked?
that'd be presumptuous on my part, but if the council wanted to, we would.
Well, I'm just going to speak for me then, because I saw a memo that you had prepared, and you had given us some estimated costs on what that type of work might look like. And I believe strongly that TxDOT would need to participate as a partner, just as we're participating with BISD as a partner on crossing guards. TxDOT needs to participate with us in trying to get these sites cleaned up. Now, I am willing, speaking again for me, to allow the homeless to continue to live there, but it is unreasonable for us to expect them to keep their property clean if they do not have some place to throw their trash away. And we need to talk about that as a council and try to find a direction that we want to proceed in, keeping in mind some of the numbers that you provided us, whether or not we want to go that way, and see if that would work. Because if we provide sanitation equipment for them to throw their trash away, and they still throw everything on the ground, which then blows all over everywhere, then we're going to have to look at something else. But I would be willing, speaking for me, to stair-step it and see if that would work and create an improvement to the conditions. But we need to have that conversation as a council.
Well, it's a lot like, in a way, what we've done on TxDOT's property along the freeway that we're mowing. They used to not, we got complaints on it all the time, And we found out that they, they were paying or being paid X amount, and we said, if we do it, will you give us that money? We know that has not made us whole. I don't even know if it's half. It's probably
Go back
not.
and check. It's definitely not.
It seemed like it was.
Definitely
like
does
a
not
lot.
make us whole.
So I would say they might be willing to do part, but they're sure not going to do all. But the last time that they were here, which wasn't that long ago, we did ask the question about this, and we weren't allowed to go on their property to clean it up.
That's correct.
The spokesperson said, our attorneys will not allow that.
I think they'll allow us, again, we'd have to reach back out to them. We met with them maybe 6 months ago, and the council has talked about this issue at least twice in the last 2 years.
Or more.
And there was not agreement amongst yourself on how to move forward. We're here to do whatever 4 or more of you want us to do.
It's a difficult situation.
It's very difficult.
Doubt.
So, we drive by, and I think it bothers all of us, But we don't own it, and could we reach out to them, and would they be willing to pay 50%? I don't know. Just know that if you're going to clean it up properly, I'm going to state again, you're not going to remove the tents that are there or the belongings. You're going to pick up the litter, and to do it properly, you probably need to service it once a week or once every 2 weeks. So that's a cost, because we're going to hire a group to do it for us. And then second, if you want to put a dumpster at any location, the right size dumpster is $100 a week to leave it out there and have it serviced, picked up by a private group. So, we're here again. We get our marching orders from y'all. You just haven't been able to agree on what exactly to do every time we've talked about this. So this is the third time that's been requested to have a work session.
That's going to be with us forever.
You're going to do it forever. That's exactly right. Once you start, it's ours forever.
Councilman Pate, then Councilman Neild, and then Councilman Getz.
Well, I think we made some progress when we cleaned up over by Floyd's, but was that, wasn't that DD6?
That was us and DD6.
Okay, and that was
owned by both of us.
Okay, yeah, but that cost us $2,500 or $3,000, something like that. And I think if we took the same approach, you talk about 7th and the interstate, go on the other side of that track, go to Babes of Harriet's Park, make that circle, and we need to count those people in the census, because there's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And we do need to clean it up. And but I think it'd be incumbent upon us to have our staff sit down with our friends at TxDOT and say, look, we're not the only people dealing with this. Don, what has other cities done to help resolve this? Because somebody has come up with a good idea. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. As smart as this group is up here, we don't have to.
I don't know, some of the things some cities have done, I haven't thought was a good idea.
Well, we don't want to be like Austin. I mean, quite honestly, I had friends that evacuated Austin, and they came back and said, we're so glad we live here. If you saw what they were doing to that city, which is why the governor's coming down on Adler and the city council, because they pretty much thrown up their hands and let it go. But I think if we could sit down, what kind of authorization do you need, Kyle? Because basically that's what we sort of did when we said, if you could sit down with DD6 and see what you could work out, you did. I don't remember exactly whether we voted on it or it was a consensus.
Yeah, I need 4 or more of you to say, this is what I'd like for you to do. And then, what is it you want us to do? And then.
Because the one, DD6, we only did it one time, right?
Yeah, but they
We've done it
back
once or twice. Once, and we probably need to do it again.
It does.
We ought to be.
It's dirty.
So staff can, or I can go by there and see what the condition is today, but
they're not
I
living
think the
there.
consensus of the council was, hey, this is a mess, clean it up, and we did, and we're going to have to continue that, or we should.
Well, and they haven't come back. That doesn't mean they still don't.
No, I think it's probably back. We'll go look.
I mean, I was over there two or 3 days ago.
They weren't there?
They weren't there.
You mean the
I mean,
people weren't or the
the
trash?
people weren't. I mean, you got people still gonna throw trash out.
Will DD6 out
Good,
of
check it out.
trespassing?
Is it? All right, good.
Will
So
DD6
staff's monitoring it, that's great.
Yeah.
Will DD6 agree to sign a trespassing warrant?
I don't know.
The only thing, if I could, while he's coming up, to say about that, and I've talked about this with some other people that have the same issues in other cities, and like what Kyle was saying earlier, if it's on private property and they, do a trespass warrant and they tell them they can't be there, they're gonna move somewhere else. And what happened is some of them were close to neighborhoods and they started moving into the neighborhoods and their situation got worse. So it's kind of I don't know. But go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was just going to mention quickly that, DD6, they have a particular issue, kind of like folks standing in the roadway. If you have a lot of accumulated items within a drainage way, it's a public safety issue. And so I believe they have posted signs up where they know they've been folks staying. Now, I think Lynn went out last week and I went out last week. I think some of those signs have been ripped down, but I think they're committed to try to.
They put signs that say no trespassing?
Yes, ma'am, because of the concern of the drainage.
But, and I understand, Councilman Getz saying that he's fine with them sleeping in tents underneath the I-10. But the problem with that is by allowing them to sleep in tents there, we're not gonna do anything for the panhandling, because that's that same group that are going over to these intersections and doing it. And it's, in my opinion, the situation is not getting better, it's getting worse.
Everywhere.
We agree with
It
you.
is.
When we had lunch and met with, I think there were 3 or 4 staff members that are here today, and I think 2 people from the local TxDOT office, and they said, that the Austin office, which they answer to, and, city attorney can back this up, they're not going to remove what they told us is that at that time, they're not going to remove the folks camping on their property.
And that's what she told us the day they were here.
However, the governor directed state officials to clean out some of the same areas that was under TxDOT control in Austin.
That's right.
And so I struggle.
Haven't done that in Beaumont yet.
But I struggle with the duplicity there because, if the governor says, well, we're going to clean up Austin, but TxDOT says, okay, the governor, I have talked to Don Smith about that, and he says, if the governor tells me to clean up Beaumont, then I'll do it. Otherwise, we're going to allow them to stay.
That's what we were told.
And so that's a problem for me because, you're applying different standards arbitrarily. What I understand TxDOT's position to be is that you got to let them stay there because it's public property, but that does not mean that they wouldn't allow us to clean it up. So those are separate things. Is that fair?
It's mutually exclusive.
So
You
what's
can
the
clean-
difference between staying there and Rogers Park?
One's owned by the city of Beaumont, one's owned by TxDOT.
But they're both public property.
That's right.
But we wouldn't allow it.
We don't enforce things on private property or property we do not own without the consent of the owner.
So may I clarify 2 things. One is we need to revisit our camping situation. They got 3 votes last time instead of 4. And also have another item on the agenda to direct you and the staff to sit down with TxDOT and say, look, we want to clean this up. How can you work with us to do that? So those are the two items that we need to address up here.
But what we need to think about too is, once you do it, you're gonna be doing it forever, and if you put a dumpster out there, how many locations are we talking about? We need to tell them all of that, because there's several locations that have pretty quite a few people there.
Yeah, well, like I said, you could,
Pass the no tent order, you still can't enforce it on DD's, or on Textile.
Well,
No.
let me address the camping thing again, because at the time we brought that, and that was several years ago,
Yeah.
you know, the
I don't
law
remember the
has
detail.
evolved since then. And the present status of the law is that as to the homeless, if you're going to displace them, you have to have a place to relocate them to. And if you don't have enough beds in Beaumont to place them, then you can't displace them. That's the current status of the law. And as to criminalizing their condition, the law says is that you can't criminalize them because of the status that they find themselves in.
You said beds to take them to. Do you mean another place for them to go camp, or do you mean to
No,
provide
I
them a
mean
bed?
a place like Salvation
have to
Army,
move
some
them
other
somewhere.
place,
Yeah.
just somewhere for them to house.
So a no camping wouldn't be the solution then?
No.
Because if you did it, if we say you can't camp here, whether,
They
even if
get
it's
to
on
say,
our
well,
property.
give me a bed.
yeah, but that's not on private property, and what we voted on a couple of years ago directly was about private property. And we said, we're not, yeah, it was.
Was it private or was
Because
it out
Get
of city
said,
property?
they can stay on my property if they want.
Who?
Well, Get.
Oh.
We all love Get, and she was so generous. That's exactly what she said. She said, if they want to stay on my property, they can. And I thought that was very generous of her.
I thought that the way that had been interpreted was that if you pass a no camping ordinance, you had to give them a place to go put their tent, not a bed in a homeless shelter. Can you check and clarify that?
No. What you're talking about is dispossessing them of their personal property. If you're gonna dispossess them of their personal property, then you have to take it to a place until you give them due process and an opportunity for them to reclaim their property.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying if we're going to say you can't camp here, you can camp there. That's not dispossessing them, that's moving them.
But we're talking about private property on the camping ordinance. That's
Right.
all we're talking about. And the other thing we're talking about is sitting down with TxDOT and say, what can you do to help us clean this up? And knowing that we can't tell them to leave on those and take their tents with them at this point in time, we can, I think, have the leverage to go in from the safety and hygiene standpoint, which is exactly what we did at Floyd's, or we say Floyd's, for those of you who don't know, it was that drainage ditch behind Floyd's. Floyd's is a superior, they get superior health, but it was the drainage ditch right there by Floyd's, and we can do that.
But most of the bigger camps with the most people, I think, are on public property. Because most of them are under, like at Interstate 10. And there's one like behind Home Depot. I don't know if that's private.
There is, that's
or
private
public.
property, and there's some woods behind, I think, a nursing home, rehabilitation center
that's over
off of College.
Yeah.
They have a lot
We
of
know where
folks
they all
there.
are.
We know, the police department knows.
They do know.
We know most of them. So under that scenario, that you have, again, a lot of folks under 10 and MLK, 10 and 7th Street, and then behind Home Depot, as you mentioned, one on College, those are the ones that probably have the largest number. So 2 are owned by TxDOT and 2 are owned by private parties.
So,
Have
Go on.
those private parties done a trespass warrant?
I've given that information to Councilmember Getz, and I don't know where it went from there.
Yes, well, as to the property that is behind the nursing home facility off of College, that is owned by Beaumont Tractor, and they did, my understanding is, file a no trespass affidavit.
So that's that nursing home right after you go around the curve. It's very close to I-10. Right, like past Beaumont Emergency.
It's right across from, yes, Beaumont Emergency.
Right past there, yeah.
Yes.
so for us to move forward, we need 2 things on the agenda. One is to give you the authority to visit with TxDOT and see what they
I don't need a vote on that. I just need 4 of you to, I know that 4 of you in agreement. You haven't been in the past, so if I could just know that 4 of you in agreement to go
Do we need-
negotiate something, that'd be first, and then second, I would have Chris Boone and Tyrone work on,
The no
get
camp-
that no camping ordinance back out, give you a draft, he has got to look at it again, give you a draft, and then have a work session on that particular item with Councilmember Mouton here. Hopefully all 7 of you, so, but no, we can go, start
So if we
visiting
nod
with
our head
TxDOT.
like this.
Yeah, I need to know 4 of you want us to go visit with
If
TxDOT.
we nod our
Yes.
head like this,
Okay.
you'll talk to TxDOT.
I think the consensus is there. We'll do that. We'll reach out to TxDOT again, see what they're willing to do. Just know it's not going to look very different from where they are from a legal standpoint at this time, because you'd still, let's say we reach an agreement to go clean it up. What we're talking about cleaning it up again is picking up the litter. And so it's not going to, you're still going to have
Not gonna
tents
go
and
away,
people there,
yeah.
and fencing and bicycles, and, meaning, you ought to drive by the 7th Street and 10 underpass. I mean, it's almost like a village. And it's, again, bicycles and personal items and makeshift fencing, and a car was there 2 weeks ago. I didn't see it the last time I went by, but it's a mess. So they're not going to allow us, unless they've changed their mind in the last couple months, they're not going to allow us to go remove those items. So you're still going to see everything you see except the litter just thrown around.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
And
So-
we'll take that, and we can also, since we negotiate with every one of these individuals that pick up trash, you would think we could be able to work out a deal with one of them or all of them that have dumpsters to say, we might be able to factor that into our contract of putting one a certain place and picking it up. Just a thought.
We'll see what they're willing to pay, if anything, and give you a projected cost, new cost to do it. And like the mayor said, you'll do it every week, or what you choose every 2 weeks, and we'll do it from now on.
I believe you had something, Councilman.
Just a quick question. It's my understanding, I've read 2 different articles. One says 54%, one says 70%. But it's my understanding that Houston has reduced their homeless population by those 2 percentages. I'm not sure that we would like, their solution, but can we reach out to Houston as a sister city and ask them, what have you done, and look at their program? Whether it's 54 or 70%, that's a huge reduction in their population, homeless population. And
Yeah.
That's where they came from.
thank you, Councilman. Well, what can we reach out to Houston just to see what they're doing?
Sure can. If
On the
that,
camping, if it comes before us, if we put one in place, what do we have to do? Like what city attorney was saying earlier, beds, another location, how will that work if it is on private property?
yeah, he's gonna have to study it
Yeah.
and make a recommendation
Understand.
to you. I think he's the president-elect of the International Municipal Lawyers Association, which is a big deal. And they talk about this all the time. He tells me.
Everybody has
I've gone to
problem,
one
yeah.
conference with him, and
Yeah.
every city across the country of any size is tackling this issue, and no one solved it. I mean, there's some programs out there that definitely bring the numbers of the homeless on the streets down. But the issue does not go away. You're just trying to, maybe there are ways to help more people, get them the proper help, but you're still going to have people, panhandling and living on properties that
Yeah.
sometimes
Okay.
the public
Mayor,
doesn't like.
yeah, if you look at San Francisco as a prototype of how not to approach this situation, and Austin is not far behind. A lot of it involves drug use, and I saw a video last week of San Francisco where it's basically an open air drug market. People
Shooting gallery.
people are literally shooting heroin up on the street, and they're cooking meth, and the city council out there has basically instructed the police to turn a blind eye to it. And it has, as you can imagine, created a horrendous situation. So we cannot turn a blind eye to this. I don't know that we are anywhere near that or that we would get to that, but that is a destination that you can get to if you just ignore it.
Yeah, I think as long as I'm the city manager and Chief Singletary's the police chief and we have the folks we do, and knowing the council, we're not going to allow anything like that. In fact, you need to go out, Lynn, over here to Hewing Street off of Calder, litter everywhere, and we ought to write up those owners. I don't know, it's vacant property. It's right next to that convenience store. It's terrible. Todd Semino and I went out there today and drove around. So, you know, I think if the public can help us by calling 311 or let you all know, to let me know, to the police department, to code enforcement, we've all seen the numbers increase quite a bit, even over the last 2 years, and especially, you know, over the last, say, 5-10 years. So I don't want the public to think that, I mean, our code enforcement folks do a really good job. Our police department does a really good job. It takes time, meaning you have to give people proper notice for violations, which you consider today with those 3 properties. I mean, we can't, even though we'd like to, you have to give people notice so many days to abate it, and then if they don't, then you file something municipal court. That takes time. Some people get extensions. It's not a quick process. It just, we all know that. And the police department can go and do a lot of good work, and the public may not see it because they drive by College and I-10 and they see 2 or 3 people out there and they think, golly, why is the city tolerating this? Mm-hmm. Well, it's not our property, number one. But second, we may have written 10 citations the day before. We may have arrested a few folks, but they're out there the next day. So we have to stay on top of it. I think there is more the city can do. It's possible there's no camping ordinance, and we'll bring that back to you. And it's not an easy issue. We all live here. We all want the city to look better. And unfortunately, I'm going to digress for a second. I mean, I-10, 69 looks better than it ever has.
Amen.
That's because of our staff out there that's mowing it and weed eating, and they're on top of it. And they've only had it about a year and a half. I mean, it looks really good, and we're making progress all the time. And yeah, it's disheartening for us sometimes to drive by these locations. If we could clean it up, we would. Yeah. But unfortunately, at this point, we're not in a position.
Yes, City Manager, I'm sorry. And we have to also, you know, consider, I don't know what the plans look like, but the major project that's coming with TxDOT over the next, what 5 years, but how that's going to impact those 2 locations at MLK and 7th Street, because I'm not sure what that's going to do to that.
I think those underpasses are still going to be there probably, and so you may have and I don't know how much information you want, but what happens, this is just one example. The police department was working, and our code enforcement folks all the time. There was some woods over here by Sunlight Manor Baptist Church. Across from MLK, if you went to the event center and went west, across MLK, railroad company owned, you know, this wooded area. There are probably 30 people back there living. 30 people. One had an RV, one had a car. Sometimes you'd see children. It's a pretty tough spot. About 30 people. And the railroad company reached out to us and said, look, you know, there was a fire out there. We're going to take out all the trees, clean it up. And will you work with us to give notice to the campers? And we did. And they came up with this flyer, and I don't know, maybe did it for 30, 60 days or whatever it was, and they cleared all the trees. Well, where do you think those 30 people went? Most of them, we think, went to I-10 and MLK and now 7th Street. So they just relocated the equivalent of a mile north. So that's what happens, and talking to the top folks at the police department, what's happened over the last 30 days, I asked them to go out to, a couple locations, and they did, and they cited people, as, Chief Clay said. Well, what happened? Well, they just started going in 2 blocks. They just started moving in 2 blocks in either direction, so you had more people walking around certain neighborhoods. Again, that's scary to some people who never had people sitting on their curb all day long in front of their house. So every action, there's a reaction. And so you may try to clean up a certain area,
It's gonna go
and so
somewhere.
you have to be careful what you do, unfortunately, with so many transients right now.
Another thing, Cal, we all make these decisions. The more comfortable you make a location, that location is going to grow. The word will get out, and that location will grow. So that's an important part of the decision process that you guys are going to have to make, because the word gets out real quick. Well, this is a plush place here. They got sanitation, they got dumpster, so you got. That's unfortunately, that's an important part of what you guys are looking at.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, all right, that concludes this work session. And we'll move to public comment. So is there anyone that is waiting to speak? Do y'all know?
No, ma'am.
There's not? Okay. So there's no one waiting to speak. So I'll start with you, Councilman Samuel, please.
Mayor, you gonna read the executive session?
Oh, yes, let me do that. I had it right in front of me so I wouldn't forget, right? Okay, at the close of the city council meeting, the council will hold an executive session to consider matters related to the deliberation of the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property in accordance with section 551.072 of the Government Code, to wit, specifically city-owned property at 3455 Sarah Street. Also, consider matters related to contemplated or pending litigation in accordance with section 551.071 of the Government Code, Southern Choice Consulting LLC versus City of Beaumont, cause number A-205,533. And consider matters to deliberate the employment evaluation duties of a public officer or employee in accordance with section 551.074 of the Government Code, to wit, specifically Kyle Hayes, City Manager, Tyrone Cooper, City Attorney, Tina Broussard, City Clerk, Craig Lively, Chief Magistrate. Now, I will now start with you, Councilmember Samuel, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to inquire, there's a citizen concerned, a group of citizens rather, want to know if Steve Drive, if we've ever attempted to make Steve Drive a public right-of-way as opposed to a private street. I couldn't answer that question, but then they wanted to know, since they do not have a neighborhood association, what would be the process for them to get the city to consider adopting Steve Drive? Could you get me that information?
I will. Chris Boone and Bart Barkowiak can work on that together.
Okay? Is that all, sir?
That's all.
Okay. Councilman Pate?
Thank you, Mayor. We want to compliment our staff, Todd, and all your folks, and Kyle, everybody. When you start putting these budgets together, some people have trouble balancing their checkbook. But when you start getting them to several $100 million and knowing you got 1,200 employees and all the things you have to allocate, it requires a really dedicated effort, and we appreciate the great job that you guys are doing, because every time they audit us, they come back and tell us what a great job that you are doing, and we appreciate. I want the citizens of Beaumont to know that. We tell you on occasion, but it's important for everybody to know that there's a lot more goes into this than it looks like. When we just bring it up and say, here's what we're looking at right now. A couple of, I routinely point out people that we've had in our community that have made a dramatic impact that aren't with us. But recently we lost 2 individuals, Susan Oliver, who was an outstanding attorney here in Southeast Texas, and passed away with cancer. And she grew up and Well, actually, she's born in Alabama, but got to Texas as soon as she could. Susan was a lovely person, very involved in the community. We're going to miss her. Also, Colonel Jim Crittenden. A lot of people knew Jim Crittenden as the owner of Tricon before, Elias and Ahmad Sarkis bought it from him many years ago. But he was also a retired Army colonel, so he was dedicated not just to our community but our country, and served 30-plus years in the Army and the Army Reserves. But we're going to miss him. He's a great gentleman. I was fortunate enough to serve in his command at one time. On a positive note, next week, professional golf is coming back for women in Beaumont, Texas. The world's women's all-pro tour is coming to Beaumont. It's the Beaumont Emergency Center Babe Zaharias Open. It's going to be played at the Beaumont Country Club, which was where the original LPGA tour event, the Babe Zaharias Open, started in 1953. And Babe won that one. And while she was in town, that was when she went to the doctor and discovered she had colon cancer. And but she was one of the original founding members of the LPGA. And you see, this is an opportunity for young professional golfers to start out. This year it's a women's all-pro tour. Next year we're going to move to a Symetra tour. And the top 10 finishers in Symetra get their cards for the LPGA. And I think of no better place than Beaumont, Texas, for us to promote women's golf when we have the world's greatest woman athlete who won 82 golf tournaments, which Sam Snead tied, and he's a Hall of Famer in the PGA. But we've got a lot for which to be proud here, and so you'll be seeing some individuals that are going to be playing next week. I think we've got approximately 70 participants. There's going to be a pro-am on Tuesday, and all the money that's raised by the Zaharias Foundation will go, anything over the cost will go back to helping us pay for the renovation of the Babe Zaharias Museum, which was $215,000. And we're going to be opening it up pretty soon to the public, but for obvious reason we've been keeping it, since we're fine-tuning the renovation. We're just about completely done with that, but we wanted to make sure we had everything set up perfectly before we opened up the museum to the public, and it's still going to be free. But next week you'll be reading and hearing and seeing on television a women's all-pro tour, and we're excited that the Babe Zaharias Foundation, as president, I'm happy to say that we're sponsoring it, and it's going to be the first of many in the future. But if you get a chance, you know, it doesn't cost anything to go watch it, and golf's one of those sports that you can socially distance and see some outstanding individuals who may be on the LPGA tour. I'm not going to say they're going to be Babe Zaharias because there was only one of her. But if you get a chance, tournament starts Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at the Beaumont Country Club. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Felshaw.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the first regular Tuesday council meeting that we've had since Hurricane Laura hit. And as we were preparing for the storm, I had the privilege for the first time to witness firsthand EOC and how well it was operating as the city was preparing for this crisis. And I just wanted to say to the citizens, you can be proud of your mayor, the city manager, Tim with EOC, the staff, employees, the first responders, and the great job they did to help our city get through this crisis. A year and a half ago now, Councilman Neal and I took the oath of office for the first time on the city council. And as all new council members, we went to San Antonio to the TML training for new council members. And in the meeting, the gentleman came out and he welcomed everybody, and he asked all the new council members to please stand, and we stood. And he said, the first lesson that we need to teach you, the first thing that we need to tell you as new council members is that you're all idiots. Now, he said that because it's a tendency we all have as people, whether it's federal, state, or local. We look at government leadership, and because we lack understanding and information, we have a tendency to play Monday morning quarterback, to critique and criticize people and to say they're all idiots. I've done it. But after working close with the mayor, the city manager, this council, city employees, our first responders, I can say to the citizens of Beaumont, these people are not idiots. They're not perfect, but they're good people. They're Southeast Texas people, and they're doing the best job they can. And I just had the opportunity to be at EOC and watch how this organization works. And the mayor has said it before that she's very proud of them, but I just wanted to say I saw it firsthand, and I am proud of our city. I am proud of the way we operate and function. It's not perfect, but let me just give you one last thought. The problem with looking from the stands on the ball field and watching other people do things in leadership in the game is that oftentimes you form an opinion based on the tip of the iceberg. You see just the tip, and if you think what you see on Tuesday, what happens here, constitutes the leadership, and all they do, you're wrong. You're seeing just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath that waterline is this massive body of work and information that you're not seeing. How could you? And whenever you form an opinion based on just limited information or misinformation that you get off of social media, those two things together, you're forming an opinion that is just incomplete and it's wrong. So just wanted to brag on our city after this last crisis. They're not idiots. They're all good people doing the best they can. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Getz.
You know, last week, Councilmember Neal and I had the opportunity to join with some others to go over to our neighboring state in Louisiana and deliver some food to some first responders. And I got to tell you, we were lucky in that Laura did not come through Beaumont. I've been through all the hurricanes that everybody else has been through here, and we've not had anything, including Rita, that has done the devastation that happened in Sulphur and Lake Charles. It's just unbelievable. It's catastrophic, and those folks are going to be without water, electricity for weeks, probably months, and we just need to count our blessings and try to find a way to help our neighbors any way we can. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Have anything, City Manager, City Attorney?
I do. Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for your comments. The mayor celebrated a birthday yesterday. Happy belated birthday, Mayor.
Thank you. I did. Have anything? Okay. All right. And I don't really either. So we still have quite a bit to do. So thank y'all for coming. We are adjourned.